Hello and welcome everyone around the world to the first Crow Diaspora online summit. We as Catholics, or predominantly a Catholic country, have a tradition of remembering the past and honoring those who built society as we know it today. Therefore, I came to Vukovar so that I can remember the branitelji and braniteljice who gave all Croatians their country. Even though things are not perfect in this country, I feel confident that the movement that we are creating with Crow Diaspora will foster the much needed change we need in this country. We fought a war, but that does not mean that the battle is over. For a better tomorrow. A tomorrow that will bring all of us together. A tomorrow that will bring economic prosperity to this beautiful country. And a tomorrow that will see the blessed people of this country return to their homeland. Let's start working together today. As the Crow Diaspora Summit will display, we as Croats abroad have the key to success of this country. We have helped Croatia become the tourism capital of Europe, but now Croatia faces an even bigger challenge. How does she diversify her economy? Our first panel will host Tihomir Orešković, the former Prime Minister of Croatia, Nik Krešić, PwC US engagement partner, Davor Lukšić, CEO of Lukšić Grupa, and Viktor Dodik, CEO and President of CIBC Bank in Canada. This panel is a series of one-on-one interviews hosted by John Gašparac, Country Managing Partner at PwC Croatia. They will talk about their perspectives on life in Croatia, the economic opportunities in Croatia, and where Croatia can improve. Let's start working today for a better tomorrow. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. We're back at the Global Perspectives panel, and I have the pleasure today of having Fred Hrkac, former president of Boston Scientific and vice president of Johnson & Johnson when they first entered Croatia back in the 90s. Fred, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, John. Great to be with you.
Excellent. Fred, you've had a very interesting history with Croatia, and perhaps much longer than most people would actually realize. Please just give us a little summary of when and why you first moved to Croatia.
Yeah, so John, it was curious. I remember back in the fall of '89, November to be precise, the Berlin Wall falls, sitting in the living room and thinking to myself, that'd be a cool area to go to. At the time, Croatia didn't cross my mind as much. It was more into the region. And I figured people with, average talent could probably do well, and the people in the area would be dying for Western goods, such as consumer goods and things. So that was in November, and then in January, February, as luck has it with me, one of my friends was in a resource library at a university and saw a job posting for J&J. And at the time, there's no internet and stuff. It's all typed out and it's in these binders. And he remembered me talking about that, called me up, and I applied for a job. And of course, my parents, particularly my father, wasn't too pleased because at the time the job was to be based in Belgrade, working for J&J Yugoslavia. And the war was just starting. So he wasn't pleased at all. And so I went through. By September 1990, I'd signed on. I was pretty confident that Croatia would secede, that the office would be probably one day in Croatia. And that's how it worked out. And there was a bit of a delay in me coming over because of the war, and I switched over to the medical side of the business. But in April 1992, I landed in Croatia. And it's almost been 30 years, so one of the first people to come over.
Wow, like that's a heck of a history, and I understand that considering the nature of the industry, you've had the actually unique privilege of witnessing some of the first organ transplants being performed by doctors in Croatia. As a result of representing Johnson & Johnson, how has the medical system gone or developed since then, in your view? And first of all, what was that actually like?
So, John, it was crazy when you first thing when you move to a country where the inflation rate is 20% per month. So you come from Canada where it's whatever, it's zero, and here it's 20%. You go to hospitals that are being bombed. We had started minimally invasive surgery, and within a year we had 12 hospitals started on it. And doctors at the time were making 100 German marks, about $70 a month, and we are selling equipment worth thousands of dollars. And just to give you an idea, just a little anecdote. I remember we used to go down to Zadar, and there was only one hotel there, the Hotel Kolovare. And for some of you football fans, that's where unfortunately, Luka Modric had to grow up a few years as a refugee.
Yes.
And in the morning, we'd get up and you'd have the Yugoslav army shelling the city. Then you'd sneak into the hospital to go take a shower in the morning, then come back. If you got there at night, there was no running water. There's very little electricity. And you had to just ignore all that stuff, and you just went about your ways. We brought in like new technology into Croatia, and just to give you another story, one of my sister's friends, one of her best friends, was over in Croatia, had a appendicitis, so appendix burst, and I brought her to the hospital. One of my friends, she had a minimally invasive appendectomy, and she went back to Canada. And the guys were like, "Wow, what is this?" So she had the procedure in Croatia before it was even approved in Canada. So some of the stuff that the doctors here were doing is amazing. They're top-notch doctors, and the system's evolved a lot. I have to say that for someone living in Croatia, if you're having a regular operation that a day to day, absolutely safe to have it in the hospitals here. You're in good hands. Like every small country, the only negative of a small country in medicine is when they're rare diseases. Then the rare diseases, there's not many going on in that country, so it's difficult. So you tend to go to countries that are larger and have more. But the system itself is excellent for the amount of money and the wealth level we're at. It's really, really good.
Well, that's good to hear. I've heard it before, but it is good to hear. Obviously, it could always improve, as can anybody's health system, right? So,
Absolutely.
it's easy to be critical, but I think those are coming from you. That means a lot more than it would generally said from by somebody else. That's for sure. Appreciate that. Fred, in your various corporate roles over the years, and you've been living in Croatia and coming back and forth repeatedly, but living abroad, what's your objective view? So take off your Croatian hat. What's your objective view of Croatia as a place to invest from a pure corporate perspective?
Um, I think, from a corporate perspective, it's a little difficult because corporations, they look at sizes of markets, for example. So the first thing that Croatia, like many small countries, whether it's Austria or some other countries, when you have a small population, it's a bit more difficult. So a corporation has to look beyond the population base. So obviously Poland, for example, has 40 million people. It's an easier place for a corporation to go into. So in Croatia itself, you look for specific skill sets that might help the corporation. Or just to give you an idea, John, in 1992, when the U.S. imposed sanctions on then Yugoslavia, we closed our office in Belgrade, and the company set up an office, and we looked at the region as Southeast. Southeast. This is way back now. Of course, people are doing it 20 years later, and we looked at it as a region, and we had people situated in Croatia and Slovenia mainly, and we looked at the whole region, including Romania. So you already had a population base of 50 million. So when a corporation looks at it that way, Croatia is a great place to have people because it's a lovely place for people to work. It's in the EU. It's safe. It has international schools and stuff. So from a corporation point of view, I'd say Croatia itself, just as a country, I'm not sure it's that great. But if you look broader, I think it's interesting. In particular, skill sets that corporations are interested in, for example, the IT sector and things like that, or just clumping together the region, having a larger population base and servicing that region. Croatia is probably one of the best places in terms of languages, in terms of transportation and location. Just a nice way of life for the people living here.
Yeah, excellent. Those are all good points. I guess when I look at that, you've actually tapped on what are the barriers to investment. It's just market size, really. But opportunities are, we have innovative people. If we're creative, there's creative ways to attract investment, and we definitely have the people to do that.
And I think, John, one other point is, I don't know of a lower tax rate in Europe. I know Ireland was always touted as 12% corporate tax rates. Croatia's tax rates are very low, corporate. They're either 12 or 18%. So it's a phenomenal place for taxes. It's a phenomenal place to collect dividends. It's a great place for capital gains. If you hold things for 2 years, that's zero. I mean, you're more of an expert than I am. But from a tax perspective, it's amazing how it's progressed the last 10 years.
Actually, just a point to add to that, I think there's a reform proposed to move the corporate tax rate to 10%, actually,
Oh,
at the
I
end of
mean,
this year.
it's amazing.
Yeah, amongst other things, right? So they're looking at it and pushing that forward. And I think that's a very, very important point. Where do you want to collect dividends and corporate wise? On the personal tax wise, we're not going to go there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a bit more negative in that respect. But um, you're a member of diaspora, as am I, but we are diaspora living here. And this conference is for diaspora not living here more than anything else. I think it's to, connect them and connect us to them as well. Do you see the diaspora playing a role in Croatia's future, economically, culturally, socially, otherwise?
Yeah, I think I'll focus more on the economics because I'm probably not an expert on social and cultural. Probably they add something, but on the economic, I do. I think when Croatia is selling itself to investors, uh, I believe a Croatian has a higher probability of investing in Croatia because he'll look at some of the things that a French guy will look at and he'll get aggravated by, whereas a Croatian may understand it. I'm not saying a Croatian's foolish, but you'll overcome some of the barriers. So I think the diaspora, if I was the government, I would realign myself and try to go after the diaspora's investors. And after that, the secondary people come. When I say secondary, other foreigners that look at
Yeah.
five Croatian guys from Canada or the U.S. or whatever coming in, and let's say they have a small little company, they'll come in. So I think the government probably needs to focus on that. And again, I'm not saying tricking anything, but some of the barriers and some of the things that only a Croatian would understand and take the risk, they'll do that before someone else, and then that will help attract other people.
That's actually an excellent point. Um, you're someone who grew up and was educated in Canada. You work all over the world, and of course, you've been living here for a long time. I mean, in your view, first of all, when you first came, was there anything that really surprised you? I mean, I gather it's 1992, so middle of a war is one thing, but is there something that stood out to you? And in this entire time, if you look back, close to 30 years, what would be your greatest takeaway from living here, from doing business here? And I know you're doing business here as well. What's your greatest takeaway from this?
I'll give you my first experience and surprise, and what made me believe I'm never going to move away from here. So it was the very first day I arrived. I go check in at the Esplanade Hotel where we had our office, and I go up to the front desk, and the lady's like, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm here to check in. My name is Fred Hudakach," and I go to reach for my passport because all my life, a last name like Hudakach,
Yeah.
no chance she's going to get that. And I go, Hrkac, Hrkc. And she looks up at me and says, "Sir, I know how to spell." And I'm like, "Man, I'm home." So I was like, "Man, I'm home." They know how to pronounce my name. And it sounds ridiculous,
Yeah,
but when all your life you're
yeah,
going through that in grade school and you're trying to do that. So the first surprise is a familiarity, which is quite amazing, quite frankly. From a business perspective, I never understood because all my life I knew what organized was with processes and things like that in Canada or the U.S. And all of a sudden here, I mean, it's a war, right? But even today, things are out of process. It's not perfect, but you just have to think on your feet. So if you can't think on your feet, then it might be a bit more difficult. Or you ask people questions and ask for help. So there's a lot of forms here, for example, you fill out and I don't even know half the words on them. But if you come in and you smile and you ask the person for help, they'll help you. So life here is a little bit more tricky, but it all can be overcome. And I think the in Canada, I wasn't really an entrepreneur, and here there's definitely room for an entrepreneurial spirit versus Canada. I guess there is, but I think the difference is the stakes are higher in Canada. So if you want to do something in Croatia with $20,000, you can actually do something with $20,000 in Canada. You can pay for a big party, and that's it. So the use of capital here is by a factor of 5 or 10. Like with 20, 30, 40,000, you can seriously do something here. With 20, 30,000 in Canada, I mean, good luck. So that
that's
surprised me, and I never really thought about it because I wasn't an entrepreneur before. And the amount of opportunity here is huge. I don't think every day you should just look at things with opportunity, but if you do a deep analysis here, there's a lot of gaps and a lot of things missing. Some people look at that negative. I look at that very positive and say, great, I can help myself here. So I think
Yeah.
for entrepreneurs, it's probably like Canada or US was maybe 30, 40 years ago. So I think it's a lot easier here than it is over there, and there's less competition here. So that's what really surprised me the most.
That's actually an excellent observation, and I think something that our viewers are going to, take to heart here, something that they, give them some food for thought. And on that point, so you mentioned a few things here. So what's really, in your view, then the key to Croatia's success to develop economically going forward? Is it to tap into this type of resource?
Yeah, I think, John, I think I'm not a big fan when people say, yeah, diaspora has to have one place and an office to go to and do things. I mean, come on. I mean, in Croatia, you can set up companies in 2, 3 days. You can get information. So I think the only thing that the government should do, quite frankly, the only one thing that needs reform, everything else to me is perfectly fine. The legal system here has been very weak since I came. So since I came, and it's very simple. Like I know people start talking about all kinds of things. When a company has a receivable, someone owes you money and you have no recourse, you can't get that back. You can't go to court and get that back within 3 or 4 months. That's a problem. And that still hasn't been solved. So I think that's the only thing the government has to do, quite frankly. I'd focus just on that. And it's a big monster because it's processes, it's people, not all that stuff. Um, I think if they move that forward, I think it will help a lot of smaller people coming in, entrepreneurs and large companies. Because really, since 1992, I've been saying that to U.S. ambassadors, to all kinds of people, and it's a big barrier. The rest of the stuff is pretty easy to deal with, to tell you the truth.
Excellent. Yeah. That's simplifying and making it pretty straightforward. And I think you're actually quite right. I wouldn't argue with it. The rest is details that we can always make better, as can everybody though. It's
Yep.
it's the same everywhere in the world. So you were at Boston Scientific in Paris. You even with Johnson, moved out of Croatia. You've been to a few places with a lot of different executives and a lot of non-Croats. In your experience, what's their view of Croatia?
Yeah, as you said, John, it's Croatia's my eighth country I've lived in, so I've lived in quite a few and visited over 70. I guess I'll look at it as a story. So one of my key mentors in J&J, who's in charge of Europe, Swiss guy, very, kind of hard ass kind of guy, but very old school. And I remember he always was looking at me and he's saying, you should change your name and you should add an H to it because a C in that, and I don't understand you, and like, why are you living in that country and just come to Switzerland or whatever. And then he'd have the, he'd be kind of griping, and you can't, he's your boss, right, head of Europe and top 15 guys in J&J. And I remember he always used to say, yeah, and you people from Croatia, you guys are all like crooks and big criminals up here in Switzerland. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, yeah. And then after 5 minutes, you find out he's talking about, I'm not going to say the ethnic group, but not Croatians, but from the region. So
Yeah.
he looked at he looked at people from this region like all from Yugoslavia and Croatians and these guys and that guy's all the same. So that was his view before. And then I'm not going to say I turned his view around, but over the years, the guy, obviously I did very well in the company, so that says something. The guy pushed me all the way up. And over the years, the guy started to understand what Croatians are. He comes down a few times, then came to vacation. And I'm not saying that's the most important thing, but when executives like a country, there's a higher probability of them investing in it. If they don't like the country and the people, the chances of them investing in it is very low, unless the country is 3 billion people or 2 billion people. So I think just from that view of him, and then even my other friends, I remember this one guy, Shlomo, came down. He used to say, why are you living, he's from Israel, why are you living in Croatia? This is ridiculous. And when he came the first time, he goes, now I understand why you're living here. So the
Yeah.
point of view is the beauty is very important, because when it's beautiful, those are the small factors that allow people like chief financial officers and CEOs and presidents that say, let's invest in that country. If they don't like the country, they're not going to invest in it. That's my view. And I think it's improved a lot over the last 25 years.
I think the roadmap is simple now, Fred. We just get them over here
Yeah.
and they'll be sold.
No, I agree, John. And if they meet intelligent people, everyone is impressed with the amount of English spoken here. It shocks everybody because you go to other countries around, they don't. So once they come here and they see it, they see the people are okay. reasonably smart people, I think the barriers are very low.
That's I think that's a good point as well. Irrespective of economic conditions, this is something that's always available to us.
Sure.
And I want to get into that. I mean, you've been in the medical devices industry, so basically, the medical industry period, for most of your career, basically, and you now are actually involved in tourism a bit as well, right? Which has been significantly impacted by COVID. Um, how do you think COVID will continue to play out globally, and obviously in particular in this area of the world as well?
Yeah, so John, most of my thoughts have to do with listening and understanding as opposed to just my stuff. So just collecting the information around me. Um, when COVID came in March or April, the people that know me very well heard me saying that we're going to have a really good tour season because at the end of the day, there's 90 million German people and all kinds of other people that are not going to get on planes and they have to go somewhere on vacation. So I predicted that quite well this year coming into 2020. 21 will be slightly different because unfortunately the lack of predictability and when people make their decisions on vacations, but I still think it's going to be okay. So I think COVID, quite frankly, Croatia, I think, is in a good geographical position for it, even with this horrible thing around us called COVID. But I think the going into next year, the vaccine availability will probably be by summer or so. So it might be a bit late to save the whole summer, but certainly things will get better. I have to say that I'm surprised by the speed of the vaccine, given that vaccines, the fastest one ever developed, I think, in history was 6 years. The effectiveness is around 45%. So I think this one, if it's been done in a year and a half, that's a remarkable, remarkable feat. And if it's, I believe the effectiveness will be around 40 to 45%. The FDA is powering the studies at 50%. So that's what they're expecting, and that's what they'll get approval on. So that's going to certainly help. And we'll see. I think we're it's not 90 minutes of a football match. We're probably at around 30 to 45 minutes, and there's still a bit to go.
Yeah, quite a bit, quite a bit. Irrespective of this, now, in COVID, do you see opportunities for the Croatian economy, and as well, what are the risks as well out here? Putting aside the health side.
Yeah, so obviously the one I mentioned, we're very well positioned in tourism because, like I said, I have a lot of guests that come from Germany, and even if you started getting sick, you just get in your car and you drive home, right? So that will continue to be a big plus for us. I think the other thing that's interesting is the shift in spending. When we look at it at a global level, and it's going to include Croatia. I'll get to what it means for Croatia. People, there's about 20 to 30% of people spending that's being saved now. And people aren't going to the movies. They're not going to restaurants. They're eating at home. And that amount of money, generally human nature is to save a bit of it, but to spend most of it. And those people are going to deploy that money into different things. One of the things we see maybe happening in some of the groups, I sit on some boards and things, are deployment into health services. That means remote monitoring through telephones and apps and things like that. And that's where Croatia could play a role. In fact, last week I was at a meeting with a young lady that is happens to be in that area that's looking at things. So a lot of people through COVID were managing chronic diseases, diabetes and things through apps and things like that. And all this has done is accelerated it. It would have taken 10 years to do that. Maybe it's 3. And I think the Croatians are pretty smart in that area. They just need the problem. They have the idea. The problem is we need to link them with capital so they can capitalize on the idea, because just having it in Eastern Zagreb or something is not going to help. So there's opportunities there in health monitoring. There's opportunities, like I said, in tourism because of the proximity of Croatia. And I'd say the third thing could be we look at also localizing research and development and back offices. So a lot of corporations sent that far east to China, India, wherever. And a lot of them are looking at bringing that back closer to their operations. So, for example, if you have a back office in India, all of a sudden you can have it in Central Eastern Europe, and Croatia is a great place because of the labor costs are lower. So there could be some opportunities for back office, even research and development as well. So we'll see. Croatia has to play it well on that, but we'll definitely see, and that could be interesting.
Oh, excellent. Um, moving to a different sort of thought. You're a family man. You have three kids. They've all grown up here in Croatia, but you grew up in Canada. How would you compare family life between Croatia and Canada?
Well, I mean, John, you asked me about shocking things, right? I remember when I was driving through Zagreb, and it was about 8 o'clock at night, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and it took me a week. And I kept driving. I was looking around, and at 8 o'clock at night, when night was falling, there was little kids, 7-year-old kids, walking down the street, and I was like, I've never seen this. And it's during the war. It's '92. When I go forward, my children from the age of 7, all the kids in the neighborhood, they walk to the bus, not the school bus, the regular public bus. They all get on the bus and they go to school at the age of 7. And they all know the driver. The driver takes care of them. It's the same driver. So that's a bit of a shock. Like, people our age understand that because we used to do that before. But people today, they don't let their kids out in their front yard. So the first part, it's amazing safe place for children. It's not perfectly safe, but it's by a factor of, I'm not going to say 100, but at least 20 or 30 in terms of safety. Um, I think the life is a little more simple here. You've got access to many things that are amazing. So, for example, the first time I ever saw the seaside, I was probably 18 or 19 years old. Here, you're an hour and a half away from the seaside. It costs you probably $10 to drive there. You can swim all day. You can eat a hot dog for, I don't know, $2, and you come home. So for a family growing up and stuff like that, I think it's quite amazing. The education here, I think, is quite good. So it's also in Canada, but the family life and the safety here aspect of it, I think, is quite different than North America. It's probably North America back in the 70s and 80s.
That's a very valid point. I can echo those comments for sure. uh, fully concur. So it's safe to say you don't have any regrets moving back to Croatia.
No, John. I mean, I was trying to, you'd pre-warned me on a couple of the questions, and the best way I was trying to figure out how to say this is, to me, the phrase that comes when you come back to Croatia, the phrase that comes to my mind, it's called all in. You are all in here. So, for example, it's like when you're singing a song, and if you're singing some English song, your heartbeat is at one level. When you sing a Croatian song, it's different. And the English song can never be like the Croatian song. It can't be. When you're watching a football match, I don't care what team you're looking, if it's Real, Barcelona, whatever. When you see Croatia play, it's different. And that's what it's like living here. Like, when you help people, I remember the first patient we did, this lady from Krapina who had the first procedure. And the doctor said to me, the lady wants to see her. I'm like, I'm not going to go see a patient. And you come in there, and this lady is hugging me, kissing me, thanking me. And then she brought me some chicken meat and stuff from the farm and stuff like that. It's crazy, but it's a different life. And North America, it's all nice. It's all nice. And you go through the Monday to Friday and stuff. But I ask every Croatian to think of when they sing a Croatian song and they sing the English song, and that feeling, it's the same thing living here and living outside. It's completely different level. And from the first day that lady said, I know how to spell my last name, I knew I'd never leave here. And I just won't. And it's, you just can't. It's one-way street here, and you're not going to go back.
That's such a great analogy and a great explanation of that. I think you hit it right there. I'll touch on another thing here about you, though, that many people might not know. You're a huge fan of the Croatian national football team, as am I. But you're one guy who, the last two World Cups, you actually were at every game. You were with the team in Russia for the entire month. How was that for you?
Yeah. So, John, people that do know me know that, but for the others, so I bought a one-way ticket because I didn't want to buy a return ticket because it's a jinx, right? Because you calculate. So I bought a one-way ticket, landed in Kaliningrad. I stayed 33 days. So, as soon as I stayed 33 days right till the finals. And everybody should have that feeling in life when if you have it once, you're extremely lucky, and that's what I'm saying is it's all in when you're there. And if you go to the UEFA Cup Champions League and your team wins, you're happy. But 5 seconds later, it doesn't matter. So it's 33 days of like sports and nationalistic ecstasy. And that was my 10th tournament. So I've been to 10 tournaments previous to that, 5 Euros and 5 World Cups. And I even went to 2 World Cups when Croatia wasn't there. It was all nice, but it's not the same when your country's not there. So just a great feeling that I hope everybody gets one time in their life the ability to enjoy.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Last question for you, Fred. What would be your advice to somebody from diaspora who's otherwise considering a move to Croatia?
I think to say just come here is out of my character and reckless. I think my advice to someone would be, you don't have to have everything figured out. So if you go back to my story, I applied, I kind of was aiming at Central Eastern Europe. Then all of a sudden it may be Belgrade, it may be Yugoslavia, it may be consumer goods, maybe medical. And you go out in a direction and then you kind of figure things out previously. So as you go along, I'm sorry. So for example, if you're not quite sure about moving to Croatia, if you have an opportunity in Vienna, come to Vienna. It's like 3 hours away from here. So my advice to people is aim towards coming in the region. If it's Croatia, fine. That's the best way. You don't have to have everything perfectly figured out. That's one thing. The second thing is, all my good friends, when they start doing the calculations of how much money they need and all that stuff, it's like an endless exercise because they don't understand that the fixed cost in Croatia is at least 4 to 5 times less than in Canada. So obviously when you have children, it's different calculations. Someone young, I just keeping them back. I just don't understand why someone's saying Croatia or in Canada or in the United States or in Argentina. Why wouldn't you just come here? And the 1 year of experience here, I think, will help you back there. But just do some research, come over here, and be humble at the beginning, because even if the job you landed isn't the right job, you start somewhere and then all of a sudden you meet other people. I'm always on the lookout for people that are smart. So through experiences with people, you find people. You meet people through other people, and all of a sudden hey, that guy can maybe help me out here. So I think if you're flexible and young, it's a great place to come over, and it's not an expensive place to live, and your fixed cost is low. And just one of the other anecdotes. I mean, it's also another place when you're kind of hungry and you're young and you don't feel like cooking, and you go into a store like one of those stores in America or in Canada, and you go to the Konsum, which is our biggest store here, and you go to the counter and they have mahune that your mother makes there for like $2. Like, where else do you have that? You can go to Canada and you have Big Macs or whatever you have, but something has to be said for that. Something has to be said for that. And you have a meal for $2. You come home and the mahune they make in these stores are like your mom's or anything else. But I'm just saying, it's not a crazy place. My guess is, if someone said how much money would I have to waste in a year, probably for 20,000 Canadian or 15,000 Canadian, you can live here a year and live okay. Like, not live like a loser and sit in a dark little apartment. Like, live like a normal person. I mean, where do you have that? So honestly, there's a lot of opportunities here. Don't be foolish and just come here. That's foolish. Do some research, but you don't have to have everything figured out, particularly when you're young.
Yeah. It's that's so true, and it is a relatively very good quality of life, irrespective of many things, right? So it is.
John, right? There's a whole gang of us here. We always help each other out. So when you hear it, people are here. One guy came over a while ago. He's an electrician. So the next time I'm building a house or something, I'll maybe include the guy, right, to help him out. Why wouldn't I, right? So there's a lot of opportunities here. I think people should just come over. It's a great place.
A lot of opportunities and a growing sense of community, that's for sure. And that's what this whole conference is about as well, is to really broaden that community and bring it together globally. So, Fred, thank you so much for your time today. Some fantastic anecdotes and insights, and we really appreciate, myself personally and Crow Diaspora, we really appreciate your perspectives. Thank you so much for this.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure. I think what you guys are doing is great, and hopefully I contributed and maybe changed the mind of one person out there. Thanks.
No, I'm sure you did. Thank you, Fred. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Delbert, hi, nice to see you again.
Thanks, John.
This is Delbert Luksic with me for part of our Global Perspectives panel, and I thank him for kindly agreeing to join us today. We are looking at global perspectives on Croatia and interesting stories behind that. Davor is the chairman of Luksic Group in Croatia, otherwise owned by the Luksic family from Chile. And I will just say, a few words from my side. I mean, we met through the fact that we're the auditors at PwC with Luksic Group in Croatia, and I have to say I had the privilege of meeting your grandfather Andronico back when Villa Argentina was first renovated, right? So it was back then. But time has passed. I have a few more gray hairs, and and we are where we are today. Davor, before we get started into some detailed questions, just how about a little summary from your side on how you actually got to Croatia and why you first moved here?
Sure. Well, happy to join this panel, Jonathan. Thank you very much for the invite. And you're lucky you still have hair. So, but no, just to give you a brief background. So basically, I was after university, I worked in New York for a few years, and then moved to London, primarily in finance. So it was during my time in London when my uncle Guillermo Luksic invited me to join basically the family business here. Not just the hospitality, but we're starting to set up some other investments in real estate and setting up an investment office as well here in Europe. So I thought it was a great challenge, and I've been coming here to Croatia since 2001, 2000, I think it was. I always it's the land of my great grandfather, so it was apart from a good business challenge to start involving myself in the family business. It was also kind of a personal nice thing to come back to the land of my great grandfather.
Oh, that's excellent. And just to touch on that, when you first came here, were you surprised with Croatia? Were there any unexpected surprises or things that you didn't really think would happen or would be the case?
No, I mean, I think my biggest difficulty was the fact that unfortunately I didn't know anybody in Croatia when I first came. So obviously that adaptation period, it's a different language, a little bit different culture, of course, but my biggest problem was being alone in Zagreb without knowing anybody and just slowly starting my new life here, basically. So that was for me the biggest challenge, I'd say. But overall, I mean, I was coming already before for board meetings as an advisor, so I got to know all the teams, and everybody was extremely welcoming. So I didn't have any bad experience whatsoever when I moved to Zagreb.
Excellent. A little bit into the business, we're going to touch a few things, but in terms of your corporate role here in Croatia, I mean, what's your objective view of Croatia as a place to invest from a purely corporate perspective?
I think Croatia, generally speaking, is a good place to invest. I mean, we're lucky enough that we have the Croatian roots, in which and in my case, I was very fortunate enough to continue sort of the legacy that my grandfather started. My grandfather started investing here in a very difficult period of time for Croatia. In the mid '90s. So for me, I mean, it was more of a transition, more of a smooth transition than coming alone and set up a company. Fortunate for me, of course, there are always challenges, but overall, in my view, the experience has been extremely good.
I have to just digress for a second. You mentioned your grandfather, and in the mid '90s, I date myself back. So I came back in 1997. The first audit I did was Karlovačka Pivovara. That was the first big client I had, and maybe you want to talk just a little bit about that investment initially, how that worked.
Yeah, originally my grandfather got invited by the at the time the president Tuchman. I think it was an invitation to the complete diaspora of Croats living abroad, and of course my grandfather being very involved with Croatia and being the land of his father and visiting several times, he absolutely loved it. So he really found the need that he really wanted to contribute in rebuilding. And what better way of doing it by investing in companies that we already owned back in Chile, and companies or industries in which we had good know-how of how to operate and run, basically. So Kaloachko was actually the first investment in 1994, and we sold it, if I'm not mistaken, I think in 2003. It was to Heineken, which is the current owner of. But that was the first investment we did. So in 1994.
That's just to finish that story. But I have to say, when I first came in 97, in 1994, there were still bombs falling around Karlovac, right? So, your grandfather Andronico really took a bit of a risk as well to put his money in there, but we're all glad that he did, and
absolutely, absolutely. I think it was a big risk, but he really believed in Croatia. He really believed he really wanted to do something for Croatia as well, and thank God, our investments have been quite successful and still growing. I mean, that's the important thing.
Well, then this is the beauty of the story, to have you here today. You're his grandson, so 2 generations later, and you're here today, and we're talking about Croatia and perspectives on Croatia. So we have a history of your family here, and now that you're here going forward, and you've had successful run, and unlike others who haven't had so much success, from your point of view, in terms of this, I guess before investments are talked about, what do you think could be done to enhance Croatia's attractiveness for foreign and diaspora investment? You had a family history, but what could be done apart from that, that could go there, and what do you think some barriers to such investments?
Well, I think for global investors, one of the key things is stability, strong rule of law in a country. And even though Croatia has been tremendous improvement in that regard, I think there's a lot more improvement to do. I think red tape, bureaucracy are always a little bit in the minds of all investors when they come here. When it comes to dealing with local government. So overall, I think it's a good place to invest. Obviously, we need to continue working in making it easier, faster, more efficient for investors. And for that, I strongly believe that technology will play a huge part in this. Also, in terms of transparency and governance, in the local municipalities, we need to really take care of that there is good rule of law where you invest in the local municipalities, not just in Croatia as a whole, but specifically where you go invest.
Yeah, this is a good point. I think some of our other panels actually touch upon some of the legal barriers and aspects of different parts of investing and doing business in Croatia. So that's actually, I think, a very logical and good point. Do you see the diaspora playing a role in Croatia's future, economically, culturally, social development in the near midterm future?
I think it already is playing a big part. No, when you see all these Croatian diaspora meetings, whether it is in Croatia or other parts of the world, where you have a significant amount of Croatian citizens. So I think it really is taking place, and I've seen in terms of Croatian Canadian, I think they're extremely active when it comes to for economical, social, or cultural development of the country, which I think is very positive. So I think this has been going on for quite some time, and I think the diaspora will be a tremendous help to bring know-how, knowledge, and to try to apply it here in Croatia as well, which I think it's a big advantage.
I think is good too. I think everything you say is on point, and I think it's also going to be important to have people such as yourself to greet the diaspora who are coming in the future as well. To be as a point of reference, or somebody that could provide advice as well. I think.
Absolutely.
So as someone who grew up in Chile and you're educated in the U.S. and other places, let's say, I mean, you've gone through the ranks with the family business. You moved here. What's perhaps been your greatest takeaway from living in Croatia thus far?
I mean, for me, Croatia has been very similar to living in Chile. It's that's why I think I'm ever going to move from here unless it's going back to Chile at some point in my life. But it's been a great experience for me. This country is a wonderful country, beautiful country. Of course, if you take out the business challenges, but to live here, it's been an absolute pleasure. Quality of life here, I think it's amazingly high. You have beautiful places to go everywhere in Croatia, but also you're extremely close to Europe, so you can travel very easily to different countries in Europe from Croatia, and I think that's a big advantage. That mix of cultures from everywhere, and you can travel everywhere. I think it's a humongous advantage that has, but I think living here, it's been amazing because it reminds me of Chile in the way that it's very safe, very clean. The life is very very nice quality of life here, and that I really appreciate that.
I think that's a very interesting perspective. Chile is a country that's been referenced to many times, and it's definitely well past Croatia in terms of its development economically and otherwise. Do you think Croatia is on a similar path? You mentioned some parallels here in terms of lifestyle, but there are got to be some key success factors to help us get over the hump and move in that direction, because Chile is referred to by many as a very successful economy.
I agree. I mean, I think we're going in the right direction. I think we need to be a little bit more agile when it comes to reforms. I think Chile, it's has a very stable judiciary system, very stable rule of law. And a very, I think a very close relationship between private and public sector, which I think is very good to have in a country. I think we're going in the right direction. I think it could be a little bit faster, the reforms. Also, I think in Chile, during the 80s, there was a lot of privatizations. So the state role in the economy is far less than I would say here in Croatia. I think that should be also a priority going forward. Also because, these companies, get political, very politicized, and there's not much efficiency or productivity as well. So we need to focus on that in order to make all the economy, not just tourism sector, but all the sectors of the economy more efficient and more productive at the end of the day. So I think we're going in the right direction. I think we can be a little bit faster.
Excellent. Yeah, you mentioned reforms. I mean, there's been lots of talks about reforms. Where do you...
Sorry, John.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay. Apologies. It's technology today. It's not always reliable. You mentioned reforms, and you mentioned a few times rule of law and legislature. Do you see room for other reforms, or where do you see these reforms that need to take place. And I like the fact you mentioned in Chile the perspective of the public to private relationship being much closer. Is this where you see perhaps room for additional reforms here in Croatia, amongst other places?
Absolutely. I mean, also, I mean, I think reforming, for example, in the case of tourism, we're making great step forwards in the touristic land law, for example. So that will allow for more development, in the country, more greenfield projects. Whereas today it's more either or used to be privatizations or M&A, which I think greenfield will provide a big source for job creation as well and development in the country. In my view, I mean, given that I'm in the touristic sector, I mean, the touristic land law is going to be crucial for development. As I said, privatizations, I think it's very important, will be something that will need to be done. I think we have extremely good companies here that could be doing much better. And then, of course, in terms of SMEs, which are the biggest share of the economy, I think we really need to help them, reduce the bureaucracy and the red tape when it comes to dealing with local governments or the government in the state level. I think that could be a big help for small and medium enterprises or entrepreneurs to focus more on their work rather than on dealing with local municipalities or dealing with the state level, with whether it's building permits or whatever it is in their specific industry.
I think those are excellent points. You're basically saying, let us get to business, and we'll, you can generate the tax revenues, but focus on the substance of the business and not around these administrative things around, preventing you from getting that done. I think that's.
And I think in this regard, I think technology will play a big part, especially when governments. But I'm saying this in general terms. I think it's a global thing when governments still really apply technology in their systems. I think it will make everything much easier and much faster, which is key.
Yeah, land titles is definitely one of those areas. Yeah,
absolutely. Building permits, etc. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Setting up a business, this sort of stuff. Absolutely. You've had a chance to travel around a bit, as you said. Croatia's close to a lot of other countries. It's one of the benefits of living here is to have that proximity to many different countries and cultures. And I think in your time here, you've had a chance to meet many other executives, non-Croatian as well. In your experience, what do they think about Croatia? What's their view? Is it favorable?
I think so. I think they mostly, expats that I met here, working here, they share my feelings for Croatia. It's a wonderful country to live in. For families, I think it's absolutely amazing. Of course, I think we share also in a little bit, what could be done better in terms for businesses or for entrepreneurs to set up their businesses and to thrive. I mean, for overall prosperity at the end of the day. But I think the overall, I think the sentiment is the same.
Oh, that's always good to hear. Sticking a little bit more with tourism. You're in the tourism industry, of course, and it has been significantly affected by COVID. This year, that's no secret. And even Luksic Group, as successful and efficient as you are, you've also felt it. Do you think, how do you think COVID will continue to play out, both globally and particularly here in Croatia and in the EU? And secondly, do you see perhaps opportunities out of this, both business and otherwise, arising from COVID?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, definitely COVID has hit not only Croatian tourism, but global tourism very hard. Particularly hard in Croatia, given that, tourism has a big share of GDP close to 20%. So it's highly reliant, highly dependent on tourism. I think, going forward, we need to see what will happen. There's still too many question marks, of what will happen in the future. I'm hopeful we'll get a vaccine announcement by the end of the year, and I think that'll change completely the situation. I do believe that 2021 will be significantly better than 2020.
I hope you're right. Please, if I could be
I
a
hope
promise.
so. I hope so too. But I think really, the announcement of vaccine, whether it is late this year or early next year, will significantly change the the psychology of people. At the end of the day, I think it'll be a good news. And anyways, we saw it this year. People do want to leave, want to go out, and I think particularly this pandemic really prepared us for the future. Obviously, pandemics will come, but I think this one in general, which was very brutal, taught us how to prepare much better. Obviously, it took a little bit because we're all caught a little bit off guard, but but I think we're in the right position, to deal with a now second wave or potential third wave coming in the future. In terms of opportunities, absolutely. I think we will see them coming either end of this year, next year, but of course, I mean, we need to analyze them carefully and see whether it makes sense or not. I mean, depending on how 2021 is shaping up. We need to be careful.
Yeah, we have to be careful. I mean, I know from our business, we're looking at it, and what we've done is put forward a transformation agenda. We've actually accelerated, right? And that means digital technology, all these things. Do you see this also coming into the tourism play from your side?
Absolutely. I mean, we started doing it already this year, really accelerating, digitalization in the business, given the fact that, we needed to maintain social distance, and we did have very strong protocols and guidelines, and this is why technology was so important, for, online checking, online checkout, services, that didn't require, face-to-face contact with guests as well. And I was very happy because during the year we hired additional certification companies. One of them was TUV, and the other one was Bureau Veritas, which are global certification companies, just to help us in our, to strengthen our guidelines. And I think that was very much appreciated by both our partners, our guests, and as well as our employees, to really have very, very clear and strict guidelines and procedures. And I have to say, it worked very well because we didn't have almost any cases in the companies this year. So
that's fantastic. That is good, and I think even getting stricter guidelines and clear guidelines, this is part of the things that we've seen as well. Greater standardization of processes, actually, just to move forward. And again, that's getting back to the point you made. Let's just get to business and not worried about all this other stuff, right? But this is what needs to be put in place. So
correct. And I strongly believe that technology will play a larger part in this going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to finish about tourism, you mentioned it. It is a big part of Croatia's GDP, and the country does rely on it heavily, perhaps too heavily, to generate jobs, and of course.
Sorry, John, I lost you again, unfortunately.
I won't say away from tourism.
Sorry, John, I lost you again, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I don't know, 15 seconds ago.
I'll just repeat it quickly. Sorry. Okay. So, I was just saying the fact that we're too heavily reliant on tourism to generate jobs and GDP. And perhaps, COVID itself is also an opportunity for Croatia to diversify a bit, not so much away from tourism, but to build up other industries or take the opportunity to do that in this time, and perhaps give the economy a greater diversification.
Absolutely. I mean, and there are some interesting industries here as well. I mean, I think Croatia is very entrepreneurial, you know, in its own.
Yeah.
The thing is that we need to provide, with whether it's regulation or reform, to make these processes more agile and faster. And I think technology will help tremendously. I've been seeing a lot of IT companies, here, and the success stories like Remats and Nanobit and Infobit. They're world global companies, and like that are many others, growing in this integration, startup ecosystem, which I think it's extremely good and positive to see. So that's one. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities there, and then as I was mentioning, I think in small medium businesses, we have great talented people here, and as I said, very entrepreneurial. So we just need to provide them with the ease and for them to focus on work rather than bureaucratic issues.
Yeah.
And I think with that we should be in a good place, in a much better place.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think there's some good points on industries that are possible opportunities going forward here, and that's going to be of interest to many people, I think. You're a family man. You have 2 children now living in Croatia, and how would you compare family life between Croatia and Chile? And I would also ask you, someone, you could live anywhere in the world. Maybe you've already answered the question, but I'll also ask you why Croatia, because I know there's other places that you could go, and you have family business there. You could be there, right? So, got 2 questions there for you, right? So,
yeah. Well, my kids were born in Croatia, after
hats off.
more than 100 years, I think, since my great grandfather
Yes.
took a ship to Chile. But so no, I'm very proud of this, and my family, I think, they're very proud of this. Full circle, at least one family member, to come back to the roots. But no, I mean, as I said, to live here, it's been an amazing experience. And I find a lot of similarities to Chile, because here's very family oriented, very value oriented, very strong principles here. I think in Croatia, the people are very warm, very kind. It's so child friendly, family friendly, everywhere you go. So it's just what it reminded me when I was growing in Chile. Very much like it, and I really appreciate that. And that's why after 9 years, I don't think I'm going anywhere. but also, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have my, part of my work here in Croatia, and that of course makes a big difference. Yeah. But it's a great base, and from here, of course, I can move easily everywhere in the world. And but of course, it's also for romantic reasons, personal issues, which I think it's also very important, in life.
Of course. Obviously, your wife is Italian, and how does she find it here? Obviously she must like it too.
Absolutely, no, she loves it here, and it's important to have the proximity of her Italian family. It's also very important. For me, the only drawback, of course, is the distance with Chile.
Yes,
it's quite far. Fortunately enough, my family still travels a lot, so I get to see them quite regularly. But I think the only drawback of living so far away is that a little bit you miss the family, brothers, parents, grandparents, and for my kids to see them as well more often. That's the only drawback. Fortunately, we have my wife's family very close by, so at least that compensates a little bit for that. But she loves it here. She has great friends here, so she's a big fan as well.
That's great to hear. I think it's very important to have a fully balanced family life like that. I would take it then, to reword a question. No real regrets to coming here.
Zero.
Zero. Okay,
Zero regrets.
that's a great answer. Great answer. Douglas, what would be your advice to somebody from diaspora or otherwise considering a move to Croatia?
Oof. Learn the language. This is something that I'm very ashamed of. I have to say, not being able to really pick up the language more faster. Also, it's because of my schedule, I guess. For me and for Latins, obviously, this is quite a difficult language. But no, I mean, you know, if by some reason they decide to come here, the important thing is to. I think it's important to learn the language. I mean, for more pride issues than anything else.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but I apart from that, I don't know what to say to
Yeah,
diaspora,
no,
but
no.
just to invite them to come and really to experience the wonderful how wonderful it is to live here and hopefully they come with good ideas and ready to work and try to make a difference here.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I think you'll attest this. Most people speaking English is not a problem here, right? I mean, everybody is more or less.
No, not at all. I mean, even German or Italian, it's not a problem whatsoever. It's more of personal pride
Yeah.
than anything else.
No, good point. Very good
But,
point. I think people, there's a lesson learned there. That's for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
last sort of question to you. Okay, I've kept you on for a while, but Luxury Group is very well known here, and you're known for tourism. I mean, you divested from the brewery business, which I know you have in Chile as well. Are there any other areas you are looking to invest in Croatia? And if so, would you be willing to share this with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think during my time here, we managed to consolidate really the business here in terms of hospitality. Of course, hospitality here is in our blood, so we're always looking at some opportunities there. But as well, I think it's interesting to see, for example, the IT software startup ecosystem. I think you find it very interesting. I'm sure that we've been seeing a lot of companies there that we might or not invest. I mean, depending on the analysis and diligence that we do there. And then I don't know if any opportunity arises in companies or industries that we know how to manage, how to work. For example, the brewery, back in '94. Absolutely. I mean, we'll definitely try to participate and see whether it makes sense to go for it or not. But I think the most important thing is always looking for the opportunities. To be out there active, looking for them, and I think that's what we're trying to do all these years.
Excellent. Well, it's good to hear that Luxury Group will be around for a while to come. That's good. Just a touch, you mentioned you go to Chile often. Obviously, part of it is to see family, part is to visit group headquarters as well. And you've mentioned your view. What is the family view on the investments in Croatia? How do they look on it? Obviously, I expect favorably, but anything specific here?
No, nothing specific. I think when I go and report on the status, I think everybody's very happy. I mean, Croatia has been experiencing tremendous growth in the tourism sector for the last almost 10 years. And it's been really a great sector to be in. Of course, again, to your previous question, I think one of them, which my family asked, is what other things can we do in Croatia, to continue sort of an involvement in another industry. So as I said, we're always looking for opportunities, analyzing, and we need to see whether it fits with our investment strategy, with our investment policies or not. But I think but they're all, I think, very happy, and most of my family always spend some time here in Croatia as well during the summers, and they absolutely love this place. So it's a beautiful country. So
Any other last thoughts from your side?
yeah, I think also one of the things that I didn't mention is the approach of sustainability, of being environmentally friendly companies here, and I think we have a tremendous opportunity to do that here in Croatia, especially that we have such pristine and untouched, you know, places around the country, you know. And when it comes to in at least in our sector in tourism, you know, we're really pushing for sustainability, for environmentally friendly, not only products but sourcing of products as well, and try to contribute as much as possible into a sustainable economy, and to take care really of this environmentally of this beautiful country. So I think that will be also a very important approach, and one of the key pillars, I think, going forward when doing business or investing in Croatia. I think we need to take it deeply into account.
Thanks. Excellent point. Thank you. Excellent. Davor, thanks so much for speaking to me today, and I'm sure all of our viewers will be very happy to hear your perspectives here. Very enlightening.
Hope so.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, John. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure, Davor. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. We're back here in the Global Perspectives panel, and I've got Tim Orešković with me today. Tim, apart from being the former Prime Minister of Croatia, was also part of Pliva Teva Group, and CEO and Chairman of Xantis Pharma at the moment. Tim, thanks for joining us today, and it's an honor to have you here.
John, thanks for having me, and best regards to my fellow diaspora out there.
Thank you. Yeah, I think they all appreciate it. They're all looking forward to hear what you have to say. And I guess, you know, let's just get right into it. To start with, you know, give us a summary of when and why you first moved to Croatia.
Oh, geez, when and why? You know, that's it's. I always joke it's my wife's fault. You know, it's an interesting story. I'll try to give you the abridged, but it really is a fantastic story. One of these, you know, I need to save for a book one day. Back in '94, you know, my wife was looking through probably Gloria, some magazine, and in there they had an advertisement from Pliva saying Pliva was looking to recruit people. I was working for Eli Lilly at the time in Toronto, and she begged me to send my CV in to Pliva. So I sent my CV in, and, you know, got the standard letter back. You know, thank you, Mr. Orešković, for sending in your, you know, CV. You know, you have very interesting qualifications. If you're ever in Croatia, ever visiting, please pay us a visit. And I think they actually had the salary. They maybe wanted to scare me, so it was like 600 Deutschmarks. You know, was the salary at the time. So, you know, I put the letter away and saved it. I guess put it somewhere in one of my drawers in my office. And then back in, this was, I guess, 2008, I was cleaning the office and found the letter. And so I told my wife, hey, look what I found, the letter from Pliva. And she goes, you know what, that's that must mean that, you know, Teva's going to buy Pliva. And I said, oh, no, Teva's not going to buy Pliva. You know, we just bought a company. And to make a long story short, Teva did buy Pliva. It was Bar Pliva at the time. So Bar had just acquired Pliva a year earlier. And then she said, oh, you see, they're going to send you to Croatia. And once again, you know, us men, we're so intelligent. We know, you know, that's not going to happen. I said, honey, that's not going to happen. And sure enough, one morning I woke up, went downstairs to my office, and on my email from the global CFO, Eyal Deshi at the time, said, Tim, if you're interested in moving to Zagreb, give me a call. And, you know, obviously I told my wife, honey, you're right once again. And so we moved in, what was 2009. So it was really through the acquisition of, you know, Teva of Pliva that the whole opportunity presented itself, and then moved the family. At that point, we had, you know, the 3 girls, or I mean, 2 girls and Jacob. And then when we moved, you know, Philip was, I guess, the local Croat. So that's how we kind of came back to Croatia. But I had always wanted to come back, and we always said it'd be great if you could, you know, if there was an opportunity to move, and having a corporate assignment's a fantastic way, in this case, to move back to Croatia.
Absolutely. That's that is a great story, and you know, it's interesting how, you know, how things work out. It's just fate sometimes, right? If I recall, I think one of your first meetings might have been with me.
Actually, I think it was. I mean, when I came I don't think I had a team. I mean, I was the CFO for the EMEA region, so this was kind of a $1.5 billion region from Russia to parts of Eastern Europe, ex Yugoslavia, and I had no one in Pliva at the time, so it was really starting from scratch, which probably a lot of people thought you were crazy, leaving Canada and the nice comforts of the Canadian market and moving somewhere where you're starting from scratch. But remember, we were starting up building a finance organization, and I remember spending quite a bit of time actually with PwC and on a couple of initiatives.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, we did a few good things. That's for sure. I mean, just to move on a little bit further, how did becoming PM come about? You became prime minister later on down the line, but you had a few things. I mean, we know your career. You went to Teva on this, but I think that's a pretty good anecdote just in terms of before we get into some more business questions.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of it's you never know in life, as they say. I mean, life is I guess Forrest Gump, what, a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get inside. When I was in Pliva, so obviously I came back to Croatia, was CFO for the EMEA region for probably some 3 years. And then I wanted an opportunity to go to commercial, so I took over as president of Pliva, which probably is kind of ironic. Actually, that letter that I spoke about, when I sent the letter, the CV, when I became president of Pliva, I put that letter in my office, so it was kind of hanging there. It was kind of a nice talking piece that somebody wrote a letter in '94 here in this was 2013, became the president of Pliva. But as president of Pliva, obviously Pliva was the largest private investor in Croatia at the time. We invested some 250 million euros, brought financial shared services to Croatia. We invested in manufacturing, new plant for active pharmaceuticals, for production. We invested in R&D. So I was in the press, let's say, quite a bit, and had the opportunity to engage. Milanovic was prime minister at the time. He came to the opening, and I had various other ministers. Josipovic also came for one of our R&D openings. So I guess I got a lot of presence, if you will, or an opportunity to engage with the political spectrum. And then this really kind of started, some conversations with Hadeze early on, where Hadeze was, looking, the elections were around the corner, and they had asked me, probably was a year, maybe a year and a half before the elections. This is when I became European CFO. Would you like to be the finance minister? And I said, well, thank you. It's an honor to be considered. They were looking for a finance minister, assuming that the government would be formed. And we just kept contact. Then I became global CFO, and they were still hoping I would join or go commit. I said, gentlemen, thank you. It's really an honor. Anything I can do to help Croatia in my capacity, in this global capacity, working for Teva, I'm always there. And I did a lot of things with on the health side and in other elements to kind of support the Croatian economy and the country. But I was a corporate guy. And to make a long story short, I guess, the elections took place, and, it was a perfect, I don't know if you want to call it, a perfect opportunity, but Hadeze could not form the government. Most said, look, we'll form a government, and this has happened in other markets. I think this happened in Italy as well. We'll form a government if we bring in a non-political, so I guess a professional. Some would say a technocrat, or someone with an economic focus, and both parties supported me, and the rest was history, or is history, as they say. So it was a great opportunity. It was a privilege. This isn't something you get asked every day. I know they contacted Teva, the Teva CEO at the time, and Teva was very supportive at the time, and it was just an honor to serve and to hopefully apply the learnings that I had to hopefully move the government forward.
Fantastic. That's a great story, and we hope it continues going forward as well, some shape or form, right? Into your corporate roles, we look at your various roles, and you had some pretty impressive roles. I think you have a perspective that's probably different than most of us would have, even those of us who are here in certain corporate roles. But being a global leader in Teva, for instance, and now you're in Xanthus, what's your objective view of Croatia as a place to invest? from a pure corporate perspective. So considering that you're Croatian, just
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I can say from my Teva perspective, I mean, we didn't bring, and I think, maybe I'll touch on this as well. I don't think the Croatian government, has really leveraged this. Teva has had a lot of places it could have invested in the world. I mean, I'll look at financial shared services. Typically financial shared services, a lot of them are in Hungary. We also had one in Spain that we opened up. And usually they're lower salary markets, where you have a good skill set, good education, people can speak multiple languages. And I think Croatia, at the time I was really pushing for Croatia. There were some others who were pushing for some other markets. But I think Teva recognized, especially with Pliva, I mean, these are very well-educated individuals. Their English is fantastic. And they have a good corporate culture. So, Teva, I can see, brought in financial shared services because there was a platform with Pliva. R&D, obviously, if you look at arbitrage, and my last job in Teva was unfortunately cost-cutting, restructuring. So I was cutting 1.6 billion at the time. Before I left. And so a lot of those opportunities, what I was looking at was pure arbitrage. There were positions in some markets in Europe that were very expensive. The jobs still had to be done. And so we just moved a lot of those actually jobs in pharmacovigilance, regulatory, IT. We actually had another financial shared service in Spain. So we had one in Zagreb, one in Spain, and we just consolidated everything in Zagreb. So I can say for Teva, Croatia was a great location because of the people, proximity to Europe, well-educated, the languages. Obviously, there's a lot of German speaking, which is a key component in, being in Europe, and then Italian, the French. So that you can pick up, and I think you can get those skill sets. So all I can say is I think for Teva, we recognized it's the value that, Pliva brought, or Croatia brought, and it's in R&D, manufacturing, whereas a lot of plants we probably looked at shut down. We moved a lot of that volume to Croatia. So Croatia today is not your typical. People have their external views. We're manufacturing for U.S. markets, so U.S. FDA, which is the highest standard in GMP or good manufacturing practices, for European markets, for Russian markets, and so I think that there is in certain segments clearly a tradition. But I think there's also the the recognition that the market produces good people, and we're still competitive. If you look at it from a labor standpoint, which is a big plus these days.
Yeah, excellent. Those are all great reasons to invest. Do you see anything else that Croatia could do to improve its attractiveness as a destination for investment?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and I was in the government, so I don't want to kind of be too critical, but I will be critical. And I once, this isn't a, how to put this, this isn't, I don't want to slam it. I mean, people in the government, I can say, have really the best intention. People, typically, I think the vast majority, let me say, get into politics, and especially in government, wanting to, improve the situation. I think clearly, maybe when I was in the Pliva role, I think the one thing I recognized, I had the opportunity to go to investment forum in Canada and an investment forum in London. Okay, talking about why it's important to invest in Croatia, and I think you can just see. I think the government. I'll even use the investment when I was in London as maybe an example. We Milanovic and various other ministers were there for the opening, and it was all fantastic, positive. And I just happened to find out that they were going to be attending a group of ministers, a meeting in London to promote Croatia. And it just, once again, I don't think it was, intentional. I think people just probably, it didn't dawn on them, or they didn't think about it, that, well, the largest investor in Croatia at the time was Teva. Here you have a global Israeli manufacturing company, a leader, pharmaceutical company rather, who has invested 250 million in Croatia. And somehow, it's almost like I was pushing to promote Croatia. And so I think there has to be a better awareness of what investors want to hear, what are investors interested in, and then making the connections with, mean, here's a prime example. You know, a global company selected Croatia, and for the following reasons, and using that and communicating it back to investors, because then someone's going to say, okay, well, wow, Teva's a global company. You know, Israelis are investing in Croatia. We know Israel has a reputation of being a startup nation, obviously a very competitive nation, and they chose Croatia. And so those are some of the things that I think we need to better also educate, the politicians and perhaps us from corporate who have worked in corporate, need to kind of help them realize what is it that the investors want to hear, and make those connections, because they don't know, they're not from that segment. And so they come with the best intentions, but sometimes I see that perhaps the impact of these meetings, is not very impactful.
Tim, that's an incredible insight. That's a fantastic insight. I think that all of us could, take some lessons from that one, and hearing what investors want to hear, or knowing what they want to hear, and incorporating that into the approach from both sides, I think would go a long way even today. And again, the Teva story itself that you just mentioned, it still sounds like a winning story that could be promoted going forward.
Yeah. So I guess my greatest takeaway as Prime Minister, and I guess there were many takeaways. One clearly is, I guess, when you're on the inside and you see how things function, you recognize that. I think if our government was given perhaps 4 years, there was a lot of opportunity to improve, inefficiencies. I mean, all governments. So let me kind of, frame this. All governments have inefficiencies. It's not like we live in a perfect world. But I think, clearly, I think that, with the whole procurement process, I think before I left, I said we could probably save €1 billion just improving the procurement and the leakage that takes place. But, that's probably, a challenge most governments have. But I think Croatia, clearly, there was an opportunity there. I think the European funds, I have to say, I think the government's doing a much better job now of extracting the European funds. I mean, Pelješki Most is a huge project that's being funded by large by the European Union. And I think we're extracting more and more funds, which is helping to drive our economic growth. So hopefully we'll continue to do that. And I hope that the small and medium-sized businesses are really taking advantage of that. Sometimes they're not, they're kind of left out. And in most healthy economies, it's the mid-sized companies who really are the driver of economic growth. The other one that I would comment is privatization. I know in Croatia they don't like that word. It's I think it's part of our history. Privatization is like the big bad capitalist, or it just has a negative connotation. Sometimes you're selling the jewels of the country. But I remember watching a TV program when I came back in 2009. This is probably the first month. There was a consultant or a economist, can't remember what he was, but he said, look, if you want to get rid of corruption or minimize corruption, if you want to drive economic growth, privatize. I remember when President of Turkey, Erdogan, was visiting, I had the opportunity to sit next to him. So I asked him, how did you accelerate your economic growth? And he said, once we privatized, many of our public sector, businesses, industries, the economy just took off, because I think private sector has a different mindset. They invest where they see the growth opportunities, and that's a clear driver. So I think there still remains what I call the balance sheet items, assets that we have that we don't utilize, that we need to either give to private investors, and this may be an opportunity for.
Great point, Tim. Thank you so much. That's actually it not only just makes common sense, but I think it's something that we could all take to heart and learn from this, is really truly understand what the investor community wants, so that our efforts are actually well suited towards them, and perhaps most effective going forward that way. So definitely see that as a great story, and it still sounds like a story that could be promoted going forward, irrespective of the fact that it's been a few years.
Absolutely.
In terms of Xantis, do you plan to do any business in Croatia with them, or are you focused more on other markets?
Xantis, it's actually interesting story. It's private equity who basically the same guys who started Actavis, for those in the space, that Teva at the end acquired for some 40 billion. So the same Icelandic investors started Zantis a few years ago, and so I kind of took over some 3 years ago as CEO. I mean, our primary focus is on Russia, Czechoslovakia, CIS region. We've always explored. I can say in the region, I have made some offers, and looked at some acquisition opportunities. So we're going to continue to obviously explore those. But I've also picked up a few, and one of them actually, some great talent here. So I have, 2 Croatians that I've employed, and they both, one joined and did a fantastic job. Came back to Croatia to pursue some, I think, investment opportunities that are fantastic. A very bright, capable individual who contributed a lot during his time at Zantis. And then, another Croatian who's right now spending a lot of time on a key project in Russia, where I'm giving him a lot of scope in terms of preparing Russia for an upcoming, GMP inspection that we have, and just helping to raise the bar in terms of productivity standards. So, I think there's a lot of great talent coming back to the talent in Croatia. And so I think in this case, I've probably more leveraged the talent, but we're always looking at opportunities in terms of investments.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to hear, and I'm glad that that worked out as well with our common.
Oh, thank you, John. It was a good recommendation.
All good. Hopefully there'll be many more going forward. We're talking about diaspora, and this is our audience, and I would ask you, we have one thing in common: we're diaspora and we're from Canada. But generally, do you see the diaspora playing a role in Croatia's future economic, cultural, and social development in the near and mid-term?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think we have to say we have played a role already. I mean, I would even go back to, obviously, if we go back to the war, I think the diaspora, was very active in terms of fundraising and, the support we're all aware of. I think the support that the diaspora played, during that difficult period. I think after the war and after independence, I think many diaspora came to Croatia in different paths. And have done, I think, an outstanding job. I mean, I think, John, clearly, I think, you've done a fantastic job. And I think, so many others, not just from Canada, but from Australia, US that I've met recently that have come back that are active, either in business side, cultural, and really, I think, connecting, the diaspora, and having been here for a period of time, who can really understand perhaps, how to connect the two worlds. Maybe early on, I think it was difficult. I think now things are probably better understood. So going forward, I think there is clearly a role for the diaspora. I've still met, and I constantly meet, it seems every year, a couple of new individuals who've moved back for various reasons. I think some people, either they're not happy with the current situation and where they are right now, from a social, economic standpoint, or whatever the case may be, or there's a desire to come back to Croatia. Met a, great family on Brač, that moved back from Australia. He started a business here. He's doing extremely well. And likewise, Germans. I just thought on Kurik, we have a little place on Kurik, and he left, Germany, and moved back to Croatia with his family, and they love it. So we've played a huge role. I think we should be proud of the role that we've played, and I'm sure we will continue to play. I don't think that the diaspora is going to go away. I think many continue to come back and get integrated into the Croatian society, and will continue to play a role. And
That's great.
Actually, I would say even vice versa. So there's diaspora who've been out there for a long period of time who are coming back. But look, I think there's a lot of what I'll say, new diaspora, if we want to say, which I think is healthy. We have a lot of Croatians, I can say from my Pliva colleagues who have moved into corporate roles, either in Israel or around the world. There's scientists who are, in the University of Toronto, who are at the CERN in Switzerland. So, there's some very, high-profile Croatians who have also moved out and who are promoting Croatia, I think, in their way. And I think that's a positive exchange that, Croatians moving out and then maybe coming back, and Croatians who have been out for a long period of time moving back as well. And I think, we live in a small world today. And I think these exchanges, will just benefit Croatia long term.
Fully agree with you. I would say, exchanges are a positive thing. It's when we have a drain going one way only where we have an issue, right?
Yeah, no,
we-
that's for sure.
yeah.
I think that's unfortunately, I think a challenge we're going to have, and we need to, that's more of a political. How do we address the political challenges and how to provide the frameworks for support going forward?
So not to get political, but going back to your experience as prime minister,
Yeah.
you obviously had a different perspective, not just life in Croatia, but also the economic development of the country, which is
Yeah.
absolutely unique to literally anybody on the planet, including but all the diaspora for sure. Was there anything, I mean, you brought up some great points, but was there anything that really surprised you? What was your greatest takeaway from this experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always get asked, any regrets, I guess, with that position, and none whatsoever. If I look at the learnings or the takeaways, I think, having been on the inside, I mean, there's clearly, you can see it. I mean, anyone who's worked in a big corporation, when you come in and the business and you see how the business is working, you can see where there's the opportunities, to improve things. You come into a government, you can see there's huge opportunities, I think, to improve and make things more, let's say, effective. So I think if there's a regret, I mean, it would have been, I think to have a 4-year mandate would have been an opportunity to change a lot of things because there's a lot of opportunity. If I look at what moves the dial, and I remember when I came to Croatia in 2009, so, I mean, once again, I think freeing up the assets we have, and I think Croatia has, many assets that aren't being utilized, would also drive economic growth. And this may be an opportunity for the diaspora, depending on what segments and what assets we have, to come back and to invest in some of these to further to stimulate economic growth. The only other one I would comment, I think, and I've read some articles recently where, I think Croatia is making changes. I've recently seen, the top, 20 most innovative countries, and I was pleasantly surprised, I have to say, that Croatia was up there. So I think Croatia, look, we recently read about, I think it was Infobit. So our IT sector, I think, is very strong. We've had some great examples of people who started IT companies, have sold them for over 100 million recently. So it's a very strong sector, and one that, once again, maybe if you're in the, diaspora and you're looking to, start up a satellite, this may be a great place to do that because obviously with IT, you have the flexibility.
Absolutely, I can't emphasize that enough. I think that what you're referring to, Nanobit, the two guys who sold for over 100 million to a Swedish company. Absolutely, I think it's a great, a relatively strong startup community in Croatia, different hubs, and definitely that's where, as you said, for diaspora to come in, diaspora has money, come in and do your due diligence and come in and take a look at this. Why not, right? It could be complementary to operations they have. So
absolutely. No, look, it's all about innovation. So if I look at innovation, it's great. I think that we do have, and like you said, it's starting to move. But also, if I look at my example, where obviously I came, within Teva, looked at opportunities to help. I mean, there may be people in the diaspora who, like I said, have companies and they like to set up a branch in Europe. That may be an opportunity. Those types of investments will stimulate growth, and why not Croatia? I mean, if, like I said, if a huge Teva looked at Croatia, I think people have sometimes, I'll give you an example of, I think people have been preconditioned to some extent, which markets are, stable markets, and this market's good and this market's not so good. I think a lot of this is PR and marketing. I know people who started businesses, they started a business, registering a business in Switzerland and in Croatia at the same time. It took them less time to register in Croatia than in Switzerland. And obviously Switzerland has a great, reputation, but, things change. Things change.
It sounds like a campaign. Why not Croatia? I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Tim, those are great answers. Just want to switch the thoughts a little bit. You're a family man, and you mentioned earlier you have 4 kids. You started family life in Canada, if I understood correctly, and now you're all living in Croatia. How would you compare family life between Croatia and Canada? And do you have a preference? I think it's obvious you do, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, look, I grew up in Canada. I mean, educated in Canada, and then left, 2009. At that point, like I said, we had two girls, and Jacob, and then Philip was born 6 months after we moved to Croatia. So, look, the family loves it. The quality of life, we think is great. Um, Comparison, I think you can't compare it. I mean, I guess let me just maybe use this was maybe puts things into perspective a little bit. There's a great professor in Stanford who writes these probably world renowned for political science, talking about democracies, Francis Fukuyama. And I was watching a TV program one day. He was on it, and he was talking about great democracies in the world and how the U.S. democracy, it's declining. And then he made reference to Sweden's a great democracy. They have strong institutions, healthcare system, social network, and just a great model of modern democracy. And then he mentioned Italy. Well, Italy said the government basically follows every year and a half. You have not so effective institutions. And basically, he went on to kind of list all the things why Italy wasn't such a great democracy. Okay. And then the interviewer asked him a simple question. So he goes, okay, so you would rather live in Sweden? He said, no. He goes, I'd rather live in Italy. I mean, I think, the culture, the food, the environment, the lifestyle. And that's a little bit the way I see Croatia, where it's people have these perceptions because of, media and everything else. But here's a Stanford professor who's probably seen the world, and so it depends on the question you're asking. I have to say that the quality of life for me and my family is great. My eldest daughter is finishing med school here last year. The boys love it. Vatreni, and at the same time, I don't think we're limited in any way. I mean, I worked for Teva. I lived in Amsterdam, twice, but Zagreb was the home base. I'm in Switzerland now, traveling, but the family is here. The family, enjoys it, and I have to say, the quality of life overall is great. You're in the heart of Europe, and Croatia. Look, the people, the culture. You just, you feel you're at home.
That's I think that rings home to a lot of us. Absolutely. It's a bit of a dream, in a way, right? It's very nice.
And look, I mean, we talk about dreams. I mean, I remember when the Irish diaspora, brought a lot of their diaspora back home, and I think that the caption at the time was, there was the American dream where a lot of the diaspora left, which our parents, probably were part of that, looking for a better life. And then, so when the Irish kind of kicked off, their whole economic revival, they had the caption, come back to Ireland to kind of live the new dream, if you will, or and I think it's a little bit the same now. The world is changing, and I think you need to recognize. And I know a lot of individuals, even executives, I have to say, that I've met on Brač. I was talking to, just stumbled across one of my neighbors, and he works for Blackstone, huge, financial organization, one of the largest, if not the largest in the world. Lives in Switzerland. I mean, works in Switzerland, but lives in Croatia. And I've met so many executives who aren't Croatian. Maybe the wife is, Croatian or has some roots, but who really enjoy living here and taking advantage of the proximity to Europe, and spending most of their time in Croatia versus in Switzerland or somewhere else.
That's fantastic. Actually, that's good to hear. I've heard from a few others as well that these non-Croat executives who really enjoy their time here, right? And this is just tells us, look at what somebody else thinking that it's pretty good. Yeah. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Right? No, and I think there'll be more and more of that. They probably don't want too many people to know. I think they kind of like to keep it low key, but there are quite a few that I've met who are either London, Switzerland, Germany, and obviously with the whole COVID situation, are taking advantage to some extent. We're kind of locked down or working from homes on internet, and it's great. Spending the time on the coast, working on the coast, and being connected is not a bad thing to do.
Not at all. Not at all. You mentioned COVID. You're in the pharma industry, and you have been for quite a while. What are your thoughts on how COVID will continue to play out, both globally and in our region here in Croatia and the EU? And do you see any opportunities coming from this?
Well, look, unfortunately, I think what's happened with COVID, no one expected this would be like a global, pandemic and crisis. I think there's a health side, and on the health side, look, I think we're all waiting for a vaccine. I can say at least in Europe, and I know in most countries around the world, the numbers are starting to spike again during this period. So it's going to, once again, I think we're going to see some lockdowns. I know my colleagues in Czech have locked down. Probably Ukraine, Switzerland, a lot of these markets will start to look to lock down because the numbers are growing. The economic impact is, a huge concern, I can say for myself. I mean, if you look at the U.S. numbers, 40 million unemployed as a result of COVID. I know when I talk to my colleagues in Canada, a lot of, small businesses shutting down, companies, restaurants. I mean, these are all people who have jobs and who have a lot of uncertainty. The European, I think the GDP is going to fall some, a little over 8%, which is, huge. And for Croatia, I think, the biggest that I've seen recently, the biggest negatives have been, unfortunately, I think, Croatia has and will be hit hard, primarily because of the tourism. But, Spain was hit hard in terms of GDP decline, France, and I know Croatia were probably on the top in terms of the economic hit. Going forward, look, I think there's going to be a restructuring. Some industries, look at the airline industry, obviously, and some others that are directly impacted by COVID. People are not traveling as much. If you read what the economists are saying, countries that are more tourism based, I think will have a slower recovery. Having said that, I think Croatia, because of our proximity, and even when we had the initial forecast to Austria, Germany, Czech, Poland, I mean, some markets have been totally decimated. Croatian people still can drive in a car. You don't have to fly in a plane. So I think those that have to fly in a plane are probably going to be hit much harder. I think Croatia, especially in Istria, Krk, and maybe up to Split, didn't do as bad as we thought. But look, long term, I think we're all, if you look at their scenarios, I don't think anybody really knows, what will happen. How quickly will the, lockdown and get back to some state of normalcy. And what is normal? I think there's too many forecasts out there, and I think we just need to kind of be cautious, stay healthy, be smart, and wait till we get a vaccine, and then hopefully the vaccine will do its part. But I think there will be significant changes in the in the economies, in certain segments of the economy. Certain segments will do extremely well and are more resilient, and I think others will probably take a longer time to recover.
It's something we often talk about. It is a chance for many companies or businesses to perhaps use COVID to transform themselves and be more ready and come out of this stronger more quickly than they would have initially.
Absolutely.
Think that way, right? So I think a lot of industries can find their way in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other is when you have this type of impact or this type of I guess decline. Those businesses, there'll be those who can recover and who will, like you said, will have to reinvent themselves and come out smarter. But it's also an opportunity to invest, so I think that, there will be opportunities that people are looking at investing in, if you have certain expertise, to come in and to pick up, companies or start new companies as we move forward. So I look at those guys or those individuals who are in the IT sector. You can see more and more things are going online. So if there's an opportunity, to maybe if you're, I don't know, in Australia, Canada, wherever, and you're in a business that is clearly doing well, this is maybe now an opportunity to go global and to try to expand in other markets because of the whole COVID situation.
Actually, you mentioned individuals, and this is a good point. And I kind of want to end it on this one, but it is an opportunity even for individuals who are maybe thinking of coming back to Croatia. I've met a few recently who've just moved back this year, looking to work, and they're experienced professionals. I think it's an opportunity for them. I think that things are changing and opportunities will arise. And if you have a skill set, specifically, if you're more in the IT oriented sector, but there's others, there's an opportunity there. And in your view, I mean, what would be your advice to somebody considering coming back here? I mean, we're all, again, similar sort of backgrounds. What do you think they should think about apart from what you just mentioned?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's a couple of paths, and I don't think there's any one single formula. That's never the case. I mean, we all came back maybe slightly different, ways. But if I look at yourself and maybe the two of us, we worked. I think this is a great way. It's something that even for local Croatians, when they ask me for advice, how do I kind of move up the corporate ladder? I think if you are working for a global multinational company, or let's say a global company who has a footprint in Europe, in your, finance, marketing, general management, whatever, area you're in, and there's an opportunity for that company to move you, and you're considering you'd like to kind of get closer to Croatia, that's one path, where the company would move you back, and that's ideal. So maybe you kind of come to the European headquarters, work there for a while, and then, if there is also the company in Croatia, then there's, what I call the corporate path. Is one. The other, I would do my homework, and I would look at, if you do have a company that, like I said, is IT, or, there's different segments. It's not just IT. Do your homework. I mean, I think I would kind of tap into the Croatian market. What are those opportunities? Maybe you can leverage the technology, or you can leverage the, the business model you have, and see if it kind of fits. Or you can leverage it in Croatia or in Europe. I would kind of look at, broader. And then I think the last one I've seen, look, you don't have to be in corporate, guys. It's not like, I've, individuals who are doing, construction work, who are doing, laying, ceramic tiles, had a great business in Australia, and decide, look, I want to move the family back to Croatia. Do some homework. I can say the economy is doing very well now, unfortunately, because of the earthquake. I was doing some remodeling work myself. It's hard to get, construction people in Croatia right now. And I think it's going to be hard for the next, 2 years at least, if not longer. And so, look, even if you have your own construction business, if you're independent, drywall, ceramics, whatever the case may be, and you're more entrepreneurial, you like to start your own business, there's plenty of opportunity, I think, for people who have a strong, which I think many of the diaspora do. They have a strong work ethic. They want to build something. And now, look, our parents left to build something. This now be an opportunity to come back and to build something as well. So, those are, I think, just do your homework. I think this Crow diaspora, these forums are fantastic. So I think, once again, thank you and the organization. But tap in, get your network, connect to a few people, ask the questions. And, by doing your homework, I'm sure different opportunities and asking opportunities will present themselves that then may meet your needs.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks. And that's, I think it's a great way to finish this. And that's exactly it. Crow Diaspora is here to actually provide a platform for these type of interactions and give people opportunities. I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, as always. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future, maybe hopefully physically one day as well. We'll see. And we'll take it from there. Tim, thanks a lot. All the best.
John, thank you. And to my fellow diaspora, I mean, everyone stay healthy and stay safe. Take care and thank you.
Thanks. Hi, we're here with Nick Kresic from PwC in Tampa, Florida. Nick, good to have you on board.
John, dobar dan. Good to see you too.
Dobar dan. Thank you. I was hoping, as a starter here, just to kind of, you're a Croat from diaspora, you're a PwC partner. I'm sure people look up a bit of your background, but we do have a few things in common, and one of those as well also is playing football and soccer, or soccer and football, which is quite interesting as well. But so one of the first question I want to ask you first of all is just, have you ever entertained the idea of moving back to Croatia?
Of course. Whether it was something that, I don't want to say it was taught, right, by your parents, but certainly there have been times in my life where I've considered it, and various points in time, right? So during the war in 91, right, there was certainly a pull, if you will, a tug to consider that, right, and what my responsibilities were as a Croatian, as somebody that was born in Vinkovci, the doors to Croatia, right, and what my responsibilities were to going back, right, and so certainly that weighed on me. There were opportunities as well where, being part of the firm, being part of PwC. An opportunity to go back, right, and offers to go back, whether it was for a short period or permanent, that I would have considered as well. And certainly now, as I'm, aging, hopefully gracefully, and getting closer to retirement, there's this concept of what's next, right? What am I going to do now, and how do you leave your legacy to others? And one of the things that I've really been thinking about in that respect has been, what do I do from a benefit perspective to the country where I'm from, right, originally. So certainly something that I think about a lot.
That's you actually surprised me with your answer. I got a little bit of goosebumps there thinking about it.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's a very interesting perspective, and I was unaware that you were born in Vinkovci. So when did you actually move from Croatia?
So we moved when I was 3 years old. So in '68, we moved first to Ottawa, Canada, where I had an aunt, and my dad was very close to his sister, and he wanted to be closer to her. And escaped communist Yugoslavia, of course, at the time. And so reluctantly, I think, and he wanted to make a better life, right? The same reason why all the other diaspora have left such a beautiful place, to go elsewhere. And so he wanted to be closest to his sister. So we moved to Ottawa, Canada. And then from there, he had friends in Toronto. And so I actually spent most of my formative years from the time I was 3 till the time I was 13 growing up in Toronto and living the Canadian life, as you're familiar with there, growing up playing soccer. In Toronto was a great place to grow up as a kid, especially a kid from Croatia, right? That moved to Canada, that learned to speak English watching Sesame Street. I think everybody's familiar with Sesame Street, and so that was my introduction to Canada. And there's other stories we can get into as well, but I would say that growing up in Toronto in a tight Croatian community, Croatian churches, Croatian parks, Croatian soccer teams, Croatian, everything was about Croatian. Even though you were in Canada, you still felt as though you were amongst and with Croatians.
Excellent.
All the time. So it was always an influence, I'd say, growing up. So then from Toronto, moved to the States. Again, my dad's sister had moved and started a family outside the Kansas City area in the middle of the country in Missouri. And that was very backwards from my perspective, and growing up in a metropolitan city like Toronto, very diverse, to being in the Midwest. And so anyhow, we moved to the Midwest. I went to high school there. Grew up with my cousins, the Bartulicas, some of whom are priests, and others are in the government in Croatia, and they're all over the world as well. But nonetheless, it was always great growing up in a Croatian family. So, John, from leaving Canada, from leaving Toronto, we moved to the Midwest, just outside of Kansas City, where we had family at the time. And actually, my Baba came from Croatia, and she moved to Missouri, and that was the primary reason why we moved to the middle of the United States to be closer to her. And so certainly the traditions and the daily life of being a Croatian kid continued on as we would visit our Baba every day and get lessons from her on propuh and all the other things that were harmful to our health at the time. So
excellent.
From there, I went to high school. I played soccer for a Croatian team as well in Kansas City. We had a traveling soccer team there that played. It was Kansas City, Croatia. And then, my friends talked me into playing football on the high school team. And so I ended up playing football, and it ended up paying for my college scholarship. I got my degree in accounting while playing football at Washburn University in Kansas. And, from there I became a CPA and moved on to the accounting world.
Nick, just to make a clarification there, you played football, but you were a kicker.
That's right. Some people would argue that that's not playing football because you didn't actually hit anybody, but a very, very important part of the game. And certainly when it came time to win the game, everybody wanted you on their team, if you could make that kick. So.
For sure. No pressure. Excellent. So, now you've lived most of your life basically in North America. How often, have you been to Croatia? I know you've got a family, a wife, a couple of daughters, and when you've been, what's been your impression of these visits?
Sure, we love going back. Last year we didn't go back, and I don't recall the reasons. I don't know if it was scheduling or what, but we didn't end up going back, much to the disappointment of everyone. And in fact, we were looking forward to coming back to Brač, where I've not been to Brač, and so we were looking forward to going to the conference in May, and had that all planned out. In fact, my youngest daughter, she had no interest to travel elsewhere, but when I said, "Hey, do you want to go to Croatia?" she was all over it, and so she definitely loves it there, as do all of our kids. We went back probably 15 years ago as a complete family. So myself and my two daughters, my wife and my brother and his two daughters and his wife, and my mom and dad while he was alive at the time. And what a fantastic trip it was, right? To be able to travel through the country, spend time with family, tell stories, and then actually go to his, birthplace, his actual birthplace in Herzegovina, so that they could see that, right? And it was interesting because two remarks that my kids made that really struck me were, one was, my oldest daughter, when she looked at me and she said, "I get it now. I get where, we're from and why Baba and Dada are like that and why you're like that," and things like that. So things clicked for them, right? That was wonderful. And then my youngest daughter, who had to be 6 or 7 years old at the time, so fairly young, right? She's a beautiful 19-year-old college student now. But, at the time, she was 6 or 7. And she looked at me and she goes, "Why did Baba and Dada ever leave this place?" So striking remarks, very brief, but very poignant in terms of their meaning as to what it means to be, Croatian.
That's nothing like kids to drive it home, and I think that a lot of people who will watch them will really relate to what you're talking about there and what you're saying, right? And And it's nice to hear that. I've had a few aha moments with my kids as well who grew up here, and it's only when they moved away that they said, "Aha, that's a good place after all," right? So
Right.
It's good to see that come full circle. So, we can talk a bit more family experiences in a bit, but I want to get into, of course, business, and in particular, your experience with PwC over the years. You've undoubtedly had, the opportunity to see many transactions, investments occur in the market. Have you had any dealings with the Croatian companies or Croatian community in any way on a business level?
Not so much. It's interesting. A lot of the companies that I do work with, might have operations in Croatia, but not that I've necessarily been involved in those. And so you're part of a group team. The entity might have large U.S. operations, and I might be responsible for them, and might have a smaller Croatian operation, right, as part of the group team. So I've never dealt with them directly necessarily. So unfortunately, but there's, where there's a will, there's a way. So hopefully, at some point in the near future, we'll get that rolling.
We can arrange something then. We can, the two of us can talk about this. That's for sure.
Good.
Have you had, any thoughts? I guess this is kind of a tough question to ask you, but I want to get your perspective. What's your sort of objective view of Croatia as a place to invest from a U.S. perspective? So not as a Croat, a diaspora, just purely U.S. investor. What would you think?
That's a great question, because certainly as it's hard to take the Croatian aspect off of the table, right? For me personally, because I am, and I can't change that. And so certainly your heart tugs for that, and you'd look for an opportunity to do something like that. Objectively speaking, I'd say that there's maybe not as much desire there, other than from, if you're a Starbucks, or if you're a McDonald's, or if you're, hospitality, or an industry like that, or goods and services, right, where you could benefit the people there. And the market itself is fairly small, right? And so I think any investment has to come with a reasonable expectation of return, right? And so I think that's the line that would need to be addressed with regard to any investment decisions, other than making the decisions purely based on heart or goodwill in terms of what you would want to accomplish there for the people, right?
When you say that, and that makes complete sense, and actually I wouldn't have expected you to say anything else, to be honest. That's spot on. On the other hand, I would say, looking at it from a different perspective, is there anything that Croatia could do, or that could be done from your point of view then, that would either increase its visibility or its attractiveness to a U.S. investor?
It's interesting. That's a great question. And as I look around, there's all kinds of great examples of how Croatian influence impacts others. And I'd say the number one place from where that comes right now is from people that visit Croatia, right? I haven't met anyone that's been to Croatia that has come back and said, it was terrible. It's the worst place. I don't know why I went there, right? They all come back with a big smile on their face. They loved it. Many of them say it's the most beautiful place they've ever been, right, in their life. The warmness of the people, the ability to get around the country without having to necessarily speak the language, because, quite frankly, it's not like French or Italian or whatever. Croatian's Croatian, right? Not too many people know Croatian. So the fact that they can go to Zagreb, or they can go to, the metropolitan areas in Croatia and get around on English is, I think, a huge advantage, right? And I've looked to other countries where I've done work on behalf of some of my clients. So I used to have a client that had operations in Hungary. They had a shared service center in Hungary, and a lot of the U.S. Fortune 500 were setting up shared service centers in Hungary, of all places, right? Why were they doing that? Well, because it was a fairly well-educated workforce. They could speak English, right? And that was what they were looking for in those countries. And I think you have the same thing in Croatia, right? When you look at, really you look around and you look at, Rimac Motors, right? The most technologically advanced cars that are out there, right? Tesla's mass producing them, but when you look at the real technology that's in electric vehicles, right? People look to Rimac as kind of a flag bearer, right, of technology. So I see technology being at the forefront, right? And I think Croatians are already there, right, with regard to some of that. I see healthcare as well being at the forefront of what drives economies going forward, right? In the U.S. now, we've got an election going on, you might have heard, and it's just crazy, as a matter of fact. But, a big issue in the United States is healthcare, right? And so healthcare, I think, is a long-term play as well, going forward. And I think Croatians are well positioned for that as well. I just looked at a study the other day that ranked healthcare systems across the world, and Croatia was at the top, right, in terms of cost per bed and all that, and the level of care, right, life expectancy, et cetera. And so I think Croatia is well positioned from a healthcare perspective. Another example is you look at Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic, one of the premier healthcare systems in the United States, is run by a Croatian, right? He studied in Zagreb. And there are other doctors there as well that are Croatian. So I think on the healthcare side, it's really, another area. And then lastly, I think what's going to drive economies going forward. And again, these are my own personal views. They're not the views of the firm, as you know. And so I'm only sharing them with you as from my own personal perspective, capacity, and as a fellow Croatian as well. But the last area I would say is energy, right? And what can be done from an energy perspective, and I kind of put technology in that same realm, right? And so we talked about Rimac and the electric cars and the batteries, and you go to Dubrovnik or on the way down the Pelješac coast, and you see the windmills up on top of the hills, right? And I'm sure there's debate about the benefits of that versus the drawbacks, right, of having that up there, and does it spoil the beauty of the country, et cetera, or does it, make us greener and more energy efficient as we go forward? So I think every country, the United States, regardless, any country out there is going to be playing on those three factors going forward: energy, healthcare, and technology, in my view.
I think I want to just go back to a couple of points you touched on. First one, just being an anecdote that, anybody who comes to visit Croatia is just, so happy with what they've seen. And case in point, this summer, Magic Johnson was on his yacht.
That's right.
The whole month. We actually saw the yacht this summer, and when he got back, he just, tweeted about it, said it was amazing, right? And these are obviously ways to get people to come and spend money, and we're talking more about the investment side as well, which this could be the attraction of it. It's just obviously increasing the visibility. So I guess one point I would take from you there is that if we can get more high profile people coming, apart from Bill Gates, who comes in hiding, right? And talking about it, this will increase our visibility and maybe help us get more of those investments as well coming along for some of these bigger things. On the healthcare side, I fully agree. I think the system can absolutely be better. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the study, I've heard this as well before, especially on a cost per bed basis and this sort of thing. And it does make sense. It is. Healthcare here is actually relatively of high quality for a relatively low price, that's for sure. Having said that, what do you think about the idea? And this is one of the projects actually we're just about to sign a contract now here in Croatia, is is a sort of a wellness clinic on an island, that's going to be, aimed at older people, in addition to just pure wellness as well, and luxury, right? And I think that geographically we have the location and the beauty there to attract people to come. If you build it, they'll come, right? And but that's in line with your idea on healthcare.
Yeah, I can give you an example of a wonderful experience that I personally had in Croatia in 2016. In 2016, it was right after my father died that year in the United States, and his last wish was to be buried in Vinkovci. And so with his brothers and his mother and his father. And so he said, when I die, you take me back there. Okay. And so as a good son, of course, that's what we did, right? And so in June, we went back. I went back with my brother Matt, and we had his funeral, and actually in St. Mark's in Zagreb, there in Starigard, right? And then we went back to the cemetery there in Vinkovci where he's laid to rest. But after that, and after spending time with family during that hard week, my brother and I took off, and we had arranged to do a bicycle tour through Dalmatia, at least the lower part, right? So it started in Dubrovnik. So we went from Zagreb to Dubrovnik, and we started in Dubrovnik, went through the Pelješac Peninsula, right, on a bike, believe it or not. And we were doing, 40 miles a day or something like that. And we were at the time, I'm less so much anymore, but I still love to ride my bike. But nonetheless, we did this bike trip through Pelješac, Korčula, Hvar, and it was incredible. So when you talk about wellness tourism, right? And I know you were talking more from a healthcare perspective and whether or not they go to the baths and all that thing, that aspect of it, right? And the benefits that brings, but just active tourism, wellness tourism in terms of riding bikes. And I have to tell you, we weren't the only bike tour there. It was amazing how many other bike tours were going through the islands, and just the beauty of Croatia is incredible, and to not leverage it. And I understand the drawbacks of doing it. You end up being like Venice, right, with too many tourists. And at some point there's oversaturation, or Dubrovnik right now, right, with the boats that show up every day. But, that's the message. And the reason I would say that the outcome of that, right, investment, if you will, of allowing that to occur is that I'll take you back 10 years. I could go back 10 years, and if you said Croatia, I guarantee you only 2 or 3 people would know where it is or have heard of it, right? Now, fast forward that 10 years. How many people did honeymoons? How many people went to Croatia? How many people watched the World Cup, right?
Exactly.
And watched this little country, take on France in the finals. And I can't tell you how many people were for Croatia, the underdogs, to win that game. It was really incredible. The support that people were reaching out to me, rooting on Croatia. So not just Croatians, and everybody, but, the word is out on Croatia, right? And people know about it now. Magic Johnson knows about it, and all of his buddies know about it. So I guarantee you, the more and more people get to experience it, the more and more I think that's a benefit to Croatia.
Yeah, fantastic. You actually put it really well there. I appreciate that, and I think that's we hope to see much more of that in the future. God willing, we get through this pandemic as well, right? So, I
have my Croatian mask. Yeah, so
good on you.
one of my neighbors made that for me, actually.
Really? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
That looks great.
And she's not Croatian.
Nick, you're
She
spreading
just
the
knows
word.
I am. She just knows I am,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, you have to understand that the Croatians are, I'm going to stereotype us a little bit, right? But it's self-incriminating. We're not the quietest people, right? And people know that wear Croatian, right? And they sell T-shirts here. I don't know if you've seen them, right? They say, "I'm not yelling. I'm Croatian."
No,
no, I'm not yelling. I'm just Croatian.
that's
So
that's perfect. That's perfect, Nick. I think
Yeah.
that's we have to get that yelling into the country Croatia. The world is seeing it that way as well. They gotta, Croatia's got to yell out as well. Come over here, take a look. Having
we're
said
the
that,
proudest people there are. I mean, there's no two ways about it, right? And the World Cup was a great example of just how proud we are of not only them, the players. That was an outstanding accomplishment, but just of the country. I mean, that just brought everything all together across the world. It was really incredible. So
that month, I have to say, as an anecdote, I heard one of the commentators say this once, and it was great. He said that, that 1 month, everybody who lived in Croatia, we were all better people, and it had nothing to do with food, had nothing to do with health. It had to do with the feeling of having your team and your country represented so well, and that speaks volumes. So.
And you take our traits, we're a very happy people. People like us, we're very social, but we've got certain traits about us, right, that are really advantageous, I'd say, to us. We've got the stubbornness of the Germans, a little bit in us, and I'm not sure where that comes from, but if you meet Croatians, you know that they're stubborn, right? in most cases, but at the same time, they've got this, they've got the passion of Italians, whether it's the hair or just a passion for life and all. So when you combine those two traits, I think it's really incredible to think about what could really happen.
Yeah, I fully agree. And when you say that, and you're talking about the loud Croatians, do you see the diaspora playing a role in Croatia's future economic development, cultural and social development as well? I mean, what do you think?
Of course, and it kind of gets back to your earlier question about what attracts investments, et cetera. And I think the one thing that maybe is a barrier to that, right, is we talked about it's a small country and all that. There has to be a persuasive argument as to why you'd want to invest there, aside from maybe having a villa on the coast or what have you, but really doing something beneficial to the people there is a question. And so, there have been certainly discussions around, corruption and the state of entrepreneurship and, is it still a communist country? And all those questions that still, I think people don't have an appreciation for. I think joining the EU was also a big step in terms of achieving prominence for Croatia globally. People understand, it's part of the EU. So automatically that has some level of credibility associated with it in terms of the union of those European states, right? And that you're at a level where now, okay, well, France wants to deal with you and all these other countries want to deal with you. So I think that's helped a lot in terms of people's points of points of view with regard to whether or not they would go into Croatia.
100%. When you're talking about Croatians, just quickly, have you had any chance to work with people from Croatia in the business setting? Have you had any experiences in the States?
I have, in a couple of different roles. In fact, just before this call, earlier this morning, I had a call with one of my clients, and he's the CFO at this luxury watchmaker. But he's an American, but he knows he's Croatian, right? He knows his name ends in an IC, NIC, and so he knows he's Croatian, right? I've got another client, CFO of a large company here. That's one of my clients. He's probably third, fourth generation, who knows, here in the United States, but he also knows he's from Croatia, right? Just based on his name. And so when the ICs get together, they know, right, that they're that they're alike, right, in some form. And so I've shared Croatia tourism books with him and everything, and I know one of his goals is to make it over to Croatia at some point and take his family there. So, so I have worked with Croatians in various respects. I've had actually staff that worked for me in prior offices, right? Senior associates or associates that were Croatian, and they advanced through the firm, and they were real Croatians, right? So they were from Zagreb or whatever. They came out in the 90s during the war. They finished their studies in the States and stayed in the States, you know. And they're doing well, you know, they're managers or senior managers or moved on to other roles at other firms or companies. But certainly, you know, from time to time, you will run across our people.
That's good. That's good to hear. I like to hear positive stories about that. When we talk about others, I mean, you know, you come across a lot of people, as do I, and you meet them. And okay, I'm in Croatia, so what's been your experience with people, clients or otherwise that are non-Croat? What's their view on Croatia? Like, are they aware of Croatia, and what's their thoughts about it?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, you know, in the last 10 years, I think there's been a tremendous shift there, right? And I think they've, for all those various reasons that we've discussed, right? Whether it's, you know, the World Cup, whether it's the Euro, whether it's their travels, right, up until COVID. I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, you know, that's next on my list. Croatia is next on my list. That's where I want to go. It was very interesting. When was that? Probably in June, sometime when Croatia opened up the borders. They actually had a show on the morning news channels, the national morning news shows here, an announcement, and then they had video footage, etc., of Croatia, making the remarks basically that, you know, if you're holed up in your apartment in New York City or elsewhere and you want to travel, and because of all the restrictions, people weren't allowed to travel. But there was one place that they could go, you know, in June, and that was Croatia. And so I can't tell you how many people were considering going to Croatia. Now, I don't know if they ended up going, or if you saw an increase in the tourism in Croatia, but it was the one place, and I thought that was a great move, right, from a PR perspective, to be the only place in the world that would, you know, that would welcome tourists.
That's a great point. Yes, there was an increase in uptick, but that's not the case anymore because the uptick is in the number of cases now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
When we say that, I've seen it, you've seen it. You know, you see business cycles come and go, but how do you think COVID will actually play out here? I mean, globally first, and obviously U.S. and in Croatia, perhaps. You know, what do you think? And do you see any opportunities coming out of it?
You know, who knows, right? It's a huge issue here. As we talked earlier, it's an election year, and it is a major issue with regard to the various perspectives on what should be done. Wear masks, don't wear masks. And the various sides to the story. You just don't know. Now there's, you know, I tend to be optimistic and positive, and so I think, you know, you would see the potential for a vaccine. They're talking about it being widely available in the early part of 21, possibly before the end of this year, actually. And so I think that's a huge step forward, certainly, towards tackling this issue, right, going forward. But it certainly needs to be addressed, you know, before really you can see any kind of growth. You know, my view on it is it's going to take time, unfortunately, I think, to unwind it all. But and to what level people will feel comfortable to resume activities as quickly thereafter, etc. But, you know, my daughter had it a few weeks ago, and she's, you know, we certainly didn't want her to get it, but it wasn't as bad as what we feared. You know, she lost the taste of the sense of taste and smell, which really freaked her out. But beyond that, and a bit of a runny nose and a fever for a couple of days, she was fine for the most part, and it was fine. And it's interesting because now she's looking at it and saying, well, I've had it, so I'm good for 90 days, 120 days, whatever it is. And we're not sure yet whether people can get it again, but here in the States, I think coming into the season, the winter here, there's a very, very deep concern as to whether or not it's going to be more widespread. And the numbers are just huge, right? 200,000 dead, over millions affected. In Florida as well, the story is the same. It's a large state, and there's been a lot of impact here. I do read the Croatian news to keep up with what's going on over there, and certainly it wasn't affected as much earlier, but I can tell lately, at least relatively speaking, for Croatia, the numbers have been increasing there as well. So hopefully there's a cure, right? Soon, a vaccine or something to allow us to get back to being able to travel and go back to places that I like to go back to.
Yeah, we'll all look forward to that. And yeah, you're right. There's enough cases, and yeah, we'll see what's going to happen. I think that's the most sensible thing to say at the moment. Just to kind of close it out a bit here, but you did mention good advertising to come to Croatia for tourism, and Croatia does rely on tourism a lot for its GDP and to generate jobs and such. And it's often said it perhaps relies too heavily, and we need some diversity, right? Diversification. One of my thoughts would be there that maybe COVID is an opportunity to kind of shift a little bit of attention away from tourism and go into another sector. And I think you've partially answered that question, where you think we could go, right? When you look at healthcare, and we look at,
you can make more of these, John.
We could be producing more of those too. Yes.
PPE. I can tell you, I was just looking at a potential client here. PPE is a huge area of growth, right, for companies in the U.S. that maybe were apparel manufacturers or whatever, but businesses are transforming, right? They're transforming what they're good at yesterday into what is relevant tomorrow. And so, almost jokingly, right, with regard to the mask, but many companies are doing very well, thank you, because they've transformed into a COVID type entity, right? Specifically in terms of what they do, right? So that transformation is I think huge.
I think though
that adaptation, right?
Transformation is absolutely huge, and being two PFC guys, we know transformation is on the agenda now nonstop, amongst other things.
Right.
And that's kind of what I was trying to lead to in terms of my point about tourism. There are other industries we could focus on for sure, and there are opportunities, but even tourism itself has an opportunity to transform itself. Because it's not about ignoring tourism; it's about making it stronger and less susceptible to something like this, right? And you mentioned some of your experiences, but I think that we could perhaps if you put your mind to it, you can think about several ways that the tourism industry could itself reinvent itself here in Croatia as well, in light of the new times.
I think you're absolutely right. The Europeans, they all know, right, what Croatia is about. They go there, they're able to take their August month off and come down and spend their time on the more and have a good time, right? I think I don't know what you're seeing from a Chinese perspective and capital that's flowing in from other countries. As I read about it in the news, the Croatian news, it's not just going to be Canadian, North American investment, U.S. investment. I think it's global. And what are they seeing as advantages to to investing there as well. I really do think though that tourism is the number one opportunity. It's the number one way to spread the word, as to what the country's about, And I do live in Florida, so every day it's really sunny here. So then, I have to put on my sunglasses just to make sure that everybody knows about Croatia a little bit.
Bravo, Nick. Bravo. That's fantastic. Actually, that's my last point. Is you do live in Florida, and Florida also has a lot of tourists. It has a lot of tourism, but you have year-round tourism. And I guess my last parting thought to ask you is there anything that they're doing special to continue to have the guests coming? I mean, are they investing more into different things? Something that Croatia could learn from here.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great question, and I think the dynamic that you have in the United States is that one of the arguments within the election, right, is whether or not there should have been a stronger federal response to the COVID matters, whereas the current administration has left it more to the states to regulate their individual states, all 50 states, in terms of how they adapted to the change. The government provided guidelines, but didn't regulate, right? And the states actually provided the regulations. So each state was different in terms of what they allowed, when, etc. It's very interesting because when you mention Florida, Florida understands, right, that tourism is a big factor here, and so Florida very early on set guidelines in terms of what phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 would look like, and set those parameters out there. And now we're further down the road in terms of those phases. People are not, I'd say, as concerned about coming to Florida anymore. Everybody kind of understands what the risks are now. And I'd say people are less concerned, for the most part, about moving around, right? And so, whether to take a vacation or not, many people are tired of sitting in front of their monitors all day long, talking on, into their computer, and need a break. And that's the one thing that people look forward to. And so I think from a tourism perspective, you look here and you look at, the water and the boats and people on the beach. And while there might be fewer people than normal, I would say that the tourists are still coming to Florida, but that's based on Florida's regulations. I was just talking to somebody in New York recently, and they said, they're in New York. They don't want to leave New York because if they leave New York, say, for instance, to come to Florida, then they have to quarantine for 14 days when they come back, from Florida or from any other state. I think New York has instituted a quarantine on, 40 states, right, out of the 50. And so each state's regulations impact each state differently just based on what they've enacted, And in some states, like in Michigan, for example, she did that. The governor up there didn't allow, people in Michigan to play golf, which I love to do. Yeah, I play golf a lot in Florida, and I never stopped playing golf in Florida. But in Michigan, they couldn't play golf until like July. And the Supreme Court just ruled that what she was doing was unconstitutional and what have you. So COVID is just a big mess over here right now in terms of how it's being handled. Hopefully in Croatia, it's a bit more uniform in terms of the response. But like I said earlier, the stance that was taken early on, I think, was beneficial to Croatia, at least from an awareness perspective, from putting Croatia on the map.
Yeah, I think that point brings it home, is that when we did lockdown earlier and really got the numbers low and had regulations, just like Florida has done, and people keep coming out there. People came and it worked out well, and it's so that's actually a great message, is to, even in these times, just be as compliant as you can with respect to COVID, and business will go forward. That's for sure. So,
Right.
Nick, I'm gonna bring it to an end here. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy. You're an assurance partner, and it's busy times these days, right? So. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to catching up again soon. And hopefully next time we can see you over here on this side of the Atlantic.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Take care, Nick. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Global Perspectives panel. And today we have the honor of having Victor Dodik, President and CEO of CIBC, based in Toronto. Victor, thanks for joining us today.
Dobar dan, John. Lijepo biti tu s vama. Hoćemo dalje na engleski ili na hrvatski?
Moramo na engleski.
Ok, u redu. Može.
Može. Hvala ti puno. Vic, thank you so much. Again, pleasure to have you on this panel, and looking forward to your perspectives. I just want to start kind of simple. You're Croat from diaspora like myself. You're from Canada. We probably have a little bit in common in that respect. Growing up in a Croatian household, was Croatia a topic of discussion with your family growing up?
Well, John, it was indeed. As you grew up with it, I grew up with it. We grew up in Canada, which is a country that celebrated multiculturalism, which meant that you grew up as a Canadian, but you also stayed attached and celebrated your heritage. And the Croatian heritage that my parents brought here to Canada when they arrived in 1961 and 1964, respectively, is something that was part of our upbringing for me and my brother and those around us. We, went to the Croatian church, celebrated the Croatian picnics, and had this deep sense of our heritage, which we're very, very proud of.
Yeah, that sounds so familiar, especially
the
picnic part.
And it gets reinforced by what you're doing today, John. Your leadership in pulling this together with those around you is part of that bond that we build globally. There's half of us who have Croatian heritage that are outside the country, half that are inside the country. And I think the country and our heritage is stronger by keeping that bond together.
Couldn't put it better myself. I think that's a fantastic point there. We still maintain this very strong attachment. I know from my side here, even though I'm here, I feel this need to connect now out to everybody else. At the same time, you're gracious enough to accept in your hugely busy schedule to do this, because you have this attachment as well, and you have a message as well. And I would say that knowing you as long as I've known you for several years now, you have a strong attachment to Croatia. I know you come often.
I do.
And you bring friends. Where do you go normally? And what's been your impressions of Croatia based on your visits?
Well, a couple of things I'd say. One is I do go frequently. This past year with the pandemic, I was only able to get there once. We have a lot of travel restrictions here in Canada. We have to quarantine for 14 days every time you return. So when you run a larger financial institution, it's difficult to run it if you're always under quarantine. But generally, I go 4, 5, 6 times a year. We have a family villa that we've built on the island of Lopewood. We started that project in the early part of the last decade. We completed it, and since that time, I tend to spend 4 to 5 weeks a year there and entertain friends from all over the world, but largely from North America, who've also fallen in love with what Croatia is and what it has to offer. My kids, my wife's from Boston. She's American of Irish descent, so she's learned about all things Croatian in our 25 years of marriage. We've got 4 kids who attended the University of Notre Dame, which also, as you would know, has a very strong connection to Croatia. The largest collection of Ivan Mestrović's work is at the Snite Museum on the campus of the University of Notre Dame. And my wife would joke to me over our marriage that every time she bumps into someone or something, there's 3 degrees of separation, and you find that someone's connected to Croatia, even though it's a small country. It speaks to the pride.
Malo nas je, al nas ima. Okay.
Da, točno tako.
That's great to hear. Just, your wife likes it. Your children, they like coming. I know it's difficult. They all
Yeah,
have
they
busy
come.
schedules.
They come. They come whenever they can. They've got their busy schedules. They're between the ages of 18 and 24. So some starting their careers, some wrapping up university. But whenever that window appears, they hop on a plane and they get over there, with many friends usually in tow.
Of course, and this is again spreading the word. This is great.
Indeed.
Croatian evangelist right here. Okay. Vic, in your professional experience over the years, you've had, especially in banking, you've had the opportunity to see, investments occur, and you see why they occur globally in many parts of the world. I know maybe, in terms of Croatian companies and Croatia, have you had many dealings there? And what would be your objective view of Croatia as a place to invest? Taking off your Croatian hat,
Sure.
what do you
Look, we're living in a global world, right? In spite of all the geopolitical tensions and the pandemic-related tensions and the trade-related tensions that exist today, Croatia competes on the global scene. It competes first and foremost within the European Union. It's a large market, one of the largest trading blocks. It competes globally for capital and for the trade in goods. And we have to think that way. We have to think externally as well as internally. I mean, you got to get your internal house in order to be able to compete externally. And I think that the prospects for growth are quite positive. If I look at what's been achieved since Croatia achieved independence in the early 1990s, I think in 30 years' time, less than 30 years' time, Croatia has joined the European Union. It's become a member of NATO. It's improved its infrastructure, as evidenced by the roads and particularly by the airports, again, to support tourism. Tourism has taken off. GDP per capita growth has improved dramatically, but there's still so much more to do. So we are Canadians, a North American centered bank. We have a London office and we do some lending and business in Europe with our clients. We've seen some of our clients invest in Croatia in the energy sector, the tourism sector, the technology sector, and more broadly. But I wouldn't say it's a spike in investments, and I think there's a real opportunity to attract capital. And that's really the fundamental question that I think that needs to be answered, is how do you grow an economy in a diversified way to capture all the new innovative opportunities that are out there to improve the lives of all citizens? How do you improve the capital account? How do you improve the current account, both of which are in a deficit? And that can't last forever. You really need to kind of create those engines of growth within the economy to shine a bright light beyond simply sports, which we're very, very good at, beyond our pride, beyond our tourism, to say this is a robust, diverse economy that can compete in Europe and it can compete globally.
I think you've touched on so many things there, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on anything, but it sounds, the future is bright. I agree with you, but we can lay out a plan high level here, but there's a lot of details need to go into this, right? And one of the questions I always like to ask is, what could Croatia do, apart from obviously diversifying their economy, and that in itself is a huge task. What could they do to improve their visibility or attractiveness to the foreign or the diaspora investment even? And are there any such barriers to this right now that you see from your perspective?
So every country has barriers. It's not specific to Croatia. We often kind of get wrapped up into this and say, oh, it's, mi kao Hrvatska uvijek imamo nekih problema koje ne možemo riješiti. We can solve all of these problems. The same thing holds true for Canada, the United States, and any country for that matter. Every country has barriers. I'd say my observations from the outside in, and I haven't studied it deeply, but what I'd say is that the regulatory burden seems high. Right? An economy in today's day and age needs to be extremely flexible to be able to compete. And when the regulatory burden is high, and this isn't about environmental regulation, which we all agree is, first and foremost, particularly tourism at the forefront of the economy, you need to have very good and stringent and high quality environmental regulation, but just business regulation, the ability to do business. If we benchmarked ourselves on many objective indices that are out there, how would Croatia rank? It wouldn't rank that highly when it comes to opening a business, investing in the country, relative to other countries. We have to look at that objectively. My sense is that the state still has a significant amount of assets, and they contribute a significant amount of GDP. And I'm a big believer in the state providing, good regulation, not bad regulation, being good for healthcare, being good for education. But the state has to give an opportunity for the private sector to invest and to make the lives better for all Croats that are living in Croatia. So reducing regulation, making it easier to invest in Croatia. I'd say investing in educational institutions is really, really important. The University in Split and the University of Zagreb are two of the larger institutions in the country. When I looked at the Financial Times ranking of higher learning, they would rank 800 and 1,000 globally. Now, I think we can do better than that. I live in Toronto, where the University of Toronto ranks in the top 20 globally. That's what you need to strive for. You need to strive for excellence. Just because of the size doesn't prevent you from having a high ranking, right? So education is another area to invest. And I think the third thing is the demographic issue that I think we all recognize. There's been a lot of immigration of young people to various parts of the world, including Canada, but especially Europe. How do you bring them back? How do you create opportunities for them? How do you create an immigration policy to attract other Europeans to Croatia with skill sets that'll help grow the economy? And if you look at economic studies, 2/3 of a country's GDP growth is often highly correlated with population growth. So if you have population flatness or decline, inevitably your GDP will be held back. If your GDP growth is held back, your economic quality of life is also held back, and you can't invest in healthcare and education, all those things that matter. So it's a virtuous circle. So I'd say, regulation, more privatization is my sense, and investing in institutions of higher learning and in reversing the demographic trend.
Excellent points, all of them. And you said it, yeah, you're right. It is a bit of a cycle. It's a chicken or the egg. Do you build it and they will come, or you try to get them to come first and then you start investing? This is the thing. And the reversing the brain drain is, I agree with you, one of our biggest issues right now. So this is a challenge, actually.
And all of those things can be fixed. None of them are insurmountable barriers. We're endowed with, a great tourism industry. We got a agricultural basin that actually could thrive when invested in. We've got a smart population that's well educated, but we need to continue to double down on those things that we're good at and diversify into other areas that we could be good at.
Yeah. Just to change it up a bit, Toronto.
Sure.
Toronto's a very, very strong Croatian diaspora community, one of the strongest in the world, I would have to say. And you are a busy guy. I know you grew up in it. Do you still get a chance to interact with the community now, today? And looking at it going forward, do you see the diaspora as playing a role in Croatia's future, economically, socially, culturally?
Sure. Well, a couple of things there. A little bit of an advertisement for Toronto. Toronto's become one of the great global cities of the world. It's a city that I've grown up in, and I've watched it grow up around me. It's become a financial center where large financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, and pension plans have their headquarters. It has become a magnet for immigration, a magnet for real estate. It has now become the third largest city in North America. So only New York, Los Angeles, and Mexico City are bigger than Toronto. Toronto's become bigger than Chicago more recently. So it's quite a city. And as you point out, it has a pretty substantive Croatian diaspora in the greater Toronto area. That's kind of in the southern Ontario region. Like, as I said earlier, I grew up in the community. With my day-to-day responsibilities, it's hard to see everybody, but I do keep in touch. I think one of the community has its picnics, it has its churches, but also I think from a business standpoint, the Canadian Croatian Chamber of Commerce, which is based here in Toronto, but has a presence across Canada and also interacts with the U.S. compatriots, has really done a great job in elevating Croatia, not only in the eyes of the Croatian diaspora, but importantly in the networks that the Croatian diaspora have built outside of the Croatian community, which I think are as important and perhaps more important in bringing investment, both financial investment, intellectual investment into the country. So there's a lot more to do. I think the diaspora can give back, but I also think the diaspora has to, continue to bring its network, because it's really those pools of capital that sit outside of the diaspora that can have that much of a larger effect. right? That's the way the math works. And I think that's what we all recognize. You know, we have relationships outside of our own communities. People love the community. People love the country. The fact that, you know, they fight so hard for what they get for it, the fact that they've done so well in the sporting scene globally. They've got great tourism, they've got great wines, and they've got smart people. And as people are getting experience with that, they're seeing returns on their investments. That's a bit of a derivative of a domino effect, right? A positive effect of a growing economy.
Absolutely. I'm glad, you know, just an anecdote, you mentioned great wines. Absolutely fully agree on the wine side.
Well, look, as an example, there's a chap in Boston who imports Croatian wines. He's American from what I can see. His wife's originally from Croatia. They've got a great importing business. And on Thursday night, they've got the Croatian ambassador in the United States and their company hosting Martinovo, which is, you know, the blessings of the wine. So there's a Zoom call for all of us who are very interested, which will be great. It'll be a great way to spend an hour together.
What a great idea. That sounds fantastic. Keeping traditions alive. That's
for sure.
Yeah. Vic, you're someone who grew up in Canada, who was educated in Canada and the US. And I imagine you've had some chance to work with people who've come from Croatia. And if you have, what has been your impressions of these people?
Look, they're smart. They're as smart as anybody that wants to compete and win. They're, you know, good people. There are people in the Fortune 500 that aren't evidently Croatian, but they're connected either because they're half Croatian or they've got a Croatian cousin or a Croatian relative. And all of them speak positively about it. Most of them have been there. So my strong sense is that we punch above our weight. And I think we need to bring some of that back in terms of helping the country through those connections and through those relationships. And what I've seen so far, I'm proud of. And then, you know, the fact that we're kind of keeping our heritage and keeping close to it and keeping it nurtured is also an important part, at least of what I believe in.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a bit of maybe a executive network out there that we need to tap into.
I think there is, and it's those who have a connection personally to it, but it's also that network that goes beyond that immediate network for sure.
Yeah, you're often in Europe, Vic. I know this, and I know not giving away your whereabouts, but you do go to Davos for the summit annually.
I've attended Davos, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in your experience, you know, and how have other sort of non-Croat executives, how do they view Croatia from your point of view, these top-level guys? I'm sure you've had a few discussions here and there. Is it a favorable point of view, or is it more tourism-like?
Well, you know, in the advertising business, they always measure unaided awareness and aided awareness. I say on an unaided basis, when you talk about the country, people know it. People get a positive vibe about it. But then usually the dialogue kind of stops there because it's not evident to them how they can invest, right? And that's, I think, the great gulf that exists today. It really, you know, improving the standard of living of everybody there all has to do with how you grow the economy and how everybody can benefit from that economic growth. And I think that message, the government is working diligently to kind of expand that message and echo that message. I think the private sector needs to continue to do more of that. I think the gap is closing in terms of knowledge, in terms of opportunities. But I think we should recognize, as I said at the outset, John, that we're living in a global world where we're competing for capital, just like Singapore is, just like Canada is, just like Australia is. Mm-hmm. And we need to work extra special hard because we're a smaller country. But we also have the benefit of the European Union that we're a part of, and it's one of the largest trading blocs in the world. So there's so much to work with already that we just need to continue to demonstrate to those people who want to invest in Croatia that the opportunities are there, that the capital is welcome with open hands, that people will continue to nurture that capital so that you can realize a return better than you can in many other jurisdictions that people consider investing in. You know, it's not, we're living in a country of 200 plus, in a world of 200 plus countries. Everybody wants capital. Everybody wants opportunity. How do you objectively stand tall in all of that and demonstrate to all the investors, diaspora and connectivity aside, that on the facts, this is a great place to do business?
That's a very strong message and a very good message. I think that people should actually, you know, take to heart. And consider this. There's some great points there, and I do appreciate the fact that, getting back to what you said earlier, there are barriers everywhere, and not just in Croatia. We can't make ourselves the
They
victims of
exist
everything.
everywhere.
Yeah,
They exist everywhere, right? So let's grow. I always say, let's just grow, and let's grow smartly.
absolutely. Now, as a banker, you've seen not just investments, you've seen business cycles come and go. And,
Yeah.
we're talking about a global economy. We have a global pandemic. We have COVID-19. How do you think this will continue to play out on a global level, COVID-19, and in particular, in Canada and the US, and perhaps your views on what you think is going to happen in Croatia and the EU as well? Do you see any opportunities coming out of this?
Well, sometimes you can't see the opportunities immediately, but they will come. And I always think that every barrier actually presents itself as an opportunity. That's the way we should think about things. But nobody can really predict what the next 6 months or 6 years will be like. Look, John, 6 months ago, who would have predicted that we'd be doing this virtually, you from your home and me from my home? We were supposed to be on the island of Brač, I think, it was the original plan in May, right?
I still like that plan.
I'm sure you're going to realize that at some point, because my overall message to everyone is these inflection points that appear, whether it's 9/11 or whether it's the global financial crisis or whether it's the COVID pandemic, we inevitably get over it and things change. After 9/11, airport security changed. Security globally changed. Geopolitics started to change more. After the global financial crisis of 07, 08, banks had to be better capitalized. And as you see today in the COVID pandemic, banks haven't been the lightning rod of problems. Banks have been the facilitators of capital and government stimulus. So, we've learned to do that. Now, what do we do after the pandemic? Obviously, things will change as well. What I often do is I share this picture with my friends to show them that we've been there before. So what is this picture? This is a picture close to the city that you grew up in, John. It's in Calgary, Alberta, which is Calgary in Canada, 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic. And it is our main bank branch in Calgary where everybody has a face mask on. Everybody has a cover their nose and their mouth, right? You see it here. And we got through it. And it was at the end of the First World War, the Great War, right? And yet after that, you had the Roaring 20s. And then you hit the Great Depression. So after this pandemic, things will change. Protocols around tourism, protocols around travel will change. Technology opportunities will present themselves. Security of food supply and agriculture are becoming more and more important. So these are opportunities rather than barriers. These are inflection points that present a new avenue for growth. And I always look at any problem as something to solve rather than something to commiserate over, right? So let's solve the problem. Let's remove the barriers. And COVID-19 will get behind us soon enough. And tourism will be back again. But then the question is, how can we be better than before the pandemic is the question I'd ask myself.
Exactly. First of all, I love the fact you said Roaring 20s. We have the 20s ahead of us now as well. So let's hope history is going to repeat itself.
Possible. The government stimulus that has been presented in the United States, in Canada, Australia, the European community, with the 760 billion euro program. I think it's called part of it's called the SURE program. Those funds are meant to stimulate the economy. Interest rates are low. Government borrowing has grown. I think in the short term, it's not a concern, but in the longer term, it can be because interest rates will go up again. And the only way to stay ahead of that is to grow your economy so your interest expense doesn't eat all the costs that eat into social programs, right? So it's I go back to the key message. It's all about economic growth in a smart, sensible, innovative way to benefit everybody.
Excellent points, both on the opportunities and the risks posed by this pandemic. I appreciate that. As a sort of final point, Vic, we've mentioned tourism a couple of times. I don't want to overdo it, but Croatia does rely actually very heavily on tourism for its GDP, and generating jobs and such. And obvious comment has always been the need to diversify, and you alluded to this earlier. And COVID potentially is that opportunity to actually speed up, accelerate that agenda, and diversify into other industries. Now, when you look at that, and you mentioned some areas as well, Canada has a very strong, diverse economy. What could Croatia learn from Canada?
Well, let me use this opportunity to present some interesting parallels, right? They're two very different countries and very different parts of the world, but there are similarities. Croatia depends on tourism. Canada depends on its natural resources, right? We're not unlike Australia or Nigeria or Russia, that's well endowed with natural resources, oil and gas and mining. And we're trying to diversify away from that. You don't walk away from it, but you diversify away from it. So Croatia is endowed with tourism. You don't walk away from it because that's the family business. But how do you kind of diversify away from the family business? So what Canada is increasingly focused on is how do you diversify that economy beyond simply natural resources, or how do we introduce new technologies into natural resources so they're more environmentally friendly, and how do we become a center of excellence in the world? I think the same holds true for Croatia in terms of its ability to do that. Canada is a multicultural country with connectivity around the world. People bring their cultures and their heritage, just like our Croatian diaspora does, to their home markets. How can we use that to enhance trade? Similarly, how can Croatia use that to enhance trade, right? And increasingly, we're recognizing that for capital to come into the country and to grow the economy, we have to compete. And we have, the United States right next door, which is a benefit, but it's also a challenge because it's such a competitive market that we have to stand up above that. And I think the same holds true in Europe. There are more competitive economies in Europe than Croatia today. And how do we raise the level of our game to be able to compete there as well? So while I look at concentrated reliance on a particular sector is always a bit of a challenge, I also see it as an opportunity. So how do you expand tourism? How do you grow the agroeconomy, which is connected to tourism? Canada's trying to do the same thing there as well. It's one of the largest exporters of wheat in the world. But how can Croatia become an agricultural powerhouse with its relatively small landmass? I think those things are all possible, right? So that's the way I'd look at it. Being concentrated in a particular sector isn't a bad thing unless you rely only on that sector for the long term. You need to diversify, right? The second thing is, the diaspora and the connectivity around the world is important. We live in a global world. And the third, I sound repetitive sometimes, but let's make sure we can compete for that capital, that when an investor shows up at the door, we can present them the opportunities and it's evidently clear to them that they can get a return on that capital.
Vic, just fantastic points. I think I could talk to you all day about this, but I know your time is also valuable and limited. I appreciate your time, as does Crow Diaspora. We're really grateful for everything you have to say. Many thanks for this, and we hope to see you again in person in Croatia.
Vidimo se opet, John, i lijepi pozdrav svima. Doviđenja.
Doviđenja. Bye-bye.